Chapter 4738. That human-shaped sacred beast was originally left behind from the ancient times, so it can't be considered as an intruder. Tian Dao solemnly swore. Although he's unusually fierce, he was actually just woken up by someone. He's also very innocent, isn't he? Xian Huang, just like you, if you're suddenly woken up from a good sleep, you'll also have a temper when you wake up, right? Xian Huang, fuck, I'll be a fool if I believe you. This temper when you wake up almost killed my disciple and his group. Hey, we really can't interfere with this sacred beast. Ah, he's also very innocent, right? Tian Dao wiped his old tears and acted cute as he discussed with Xian Huang. He was originally sleeping in the abyss of the sea. I'm afraid he might not wake up even after 1,000 years. However, someone with ulterior motives woke him up and even sprinkled a berserk medicinal liquid on him. If he wakes up now, the first person he'll kill will definitely be the person who woke him up and sprinkled the medicinal liquid on him. You talk so much nonsense, what exactly do you want to say? Xian Huang angrily kicked Tian Dao. Tian Dao, I'm suffering in my heart. Hey, I want to say. Those cultivators who came from the holy region, I can help your disciple to deal with them. But. Tian Dao's words took a turn. You also promised me that you won't interfere with that sacred beast. That sacred beast is also very innocent. So I have to fucking watch that human snake kill my disciple and his group. You have to believe in destiny. Tian Dao raised his finger and pointed to the sky. How can your disciple be killed by a sacred beast? What kind of person is your disciple? You know, I know, and even the heavens and earth know. Hey, little girls need to go through some training before they can blossom and bear fruit, right? Scram! Xian Huang angrily punched Tian Dao's eye. Tian Dao's eye instantly swelled up. Fortunately, he was a formless, colorless, and shapeless person. He reached out to wipe his eye and returned to his original appearance. You can't be so crude and violent. Tian Dao was extremely angry. He extended his fist and heavily knocked on Xian Huang's head twice. This old man is discussing with you right now. Discussion. Don't fucking refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit. Xian Huang, exclamation point. I'll drink as punishment, fucking drink as punishment. Just as Tian Dao's voice fell, Xian Huang transformed into a terrifying Tyrannosaurus. She lifted Tian Dao and threw him left and right, punching and kicking him. Old bastard, quickly remove the heavenly lock on my body. Otherwise, I'll tear your sky apart. Ow, ah. Aya. Don't hit me. Don't hit me. Don't hit me anymore. Xian Huang's temper flared up. Regardless of whether the person in front of her was the heavenly Dao or not, she would beat him up first. Fortunately, this fellow was still bound by hundreds and thousands of invisible heavenly locks by the heavenly Dao. His movements were not that nimble after being beaten up. Heavenly Dao wailed pitifully a few times and scrambled away from the Tyrannosaurus. Xian Huang, let me tell you, don't think that you can be so disrespectful to me just because I dote on you. Don't come over. Tian Dao widened his eyes and stretched out a hand to block in front of Xian Huang. Okay. You tell me, what should I do? As long as you don't bring Nitian here to cause trouble and kill that sacred beast, I will promise you anything. Chapter 4739. Is this holy beast your relative? Xian Huang looked at Tian Dao in confusion. This guy didn't seem like someone who liked to be kind. 800 years ago, there was some history, the heavenly Dao said hesitantly. Xian Huang's eyes immediately changed. With a rich expression, she sized up Tian Dao from head to toe. The corners of her mouth couldn't help but curl up slightly. You and him? What? Tian Dao looked at this guy's expression and immediately felt a chill down his spine. Put away your messy thoughts. Heavenly Dao was so angry that he was jumping up and down. We are not in the relationship you think we are. Xian Huang winked at the little old man. I understand. You understand my ass. Tian Dao was so angry that he pulled her sleeve. Let's go and find those 13 old fellows to settle the score. They came uninvited and don't even want to live such a good life in the Holy Land. Xian Huang looked at him expressionlessly. I heard you mention it last time. Aren't the days of the sacred domain rather poor and desolate? It said that you don't even have a cup of tea to drink. What poor? Tian Dao stared at Xian Huang in disbelief. I'm doing this for their own good. They have already entered the transcendent God realm. In order to reach a higher level, shouldn't they work harder than anyone else? Drink what tea? Eat what rice? These are all people in the transcendent God realm. Usually, they eat a nutrition pill every year and a half. It's simple and easy, and it doesn't consume time, right? You don't know what the Holy Land is like, so don't blindly comment. Xian Huang, why did the people in the Holy Land feel so miserable? They had already risen to such a realm, so why couldn't they even eat hot soup and hot rice? Then what was the use of reaching the large success stage? Didn't they just want to live a better life? Tian Dao saw that her expression was indescribable and immediately snorted unhappily. What do you know? Humph, you only know how to eat all day. That brat of yours is now a deity realm cultivator. So what if he doesn't eat for 3 or 2 months? He ate every day, every meal, and 3 meals a day. I learned everything from you too. You don't want to learn anything good, but you want to learn these useless things. Xian Huang glanced at him mysteriously. Tian Dao, could it be that because of you I can't taste anything? Every time I see other people eating and showing a happy expression, I feel especially bitter in my heart. That's why they made the rule that people in the Saint Domain can't even drink tea, right? Release. Bullshit. Xian Huang shook her finger and nodded secretly, I must be telling the truth. Scram. The heavenly Tao roared in annoyance. Then, it rolled on the clouds and angrily headed toward the sea. At this moment, the 13 Saint Domain elders still didn't know that they were facing imminent danger. At this moment, they were imprisoning more than 20,000 elites of the 3 continents within their own defensive walls, using their pressure to oppress Little Taisui, Thin Monk, and the others. When Heavenly Tao rushed over, he happened to see this scene. He was so angry that his bun-like face scrunched up. How preposterous. He told them to cultivate properly in the Holy Land, but they came to the river of forgetfulness to abuse their power. A bunch of reckless things. Although Xian Huang was pulled over by the Heavenly Tao, her attention was still on her little disciple. Chapter 47-40. At the same time, Arbor saw that inside the defensive wall set up by Mo Yen, the 3 figures floating in the air suddenly moved. The snake man was the first to let out a howl. With a wave of his hand, thousands of blue waves turned into countless water spirit blades, sweeping towards Mo Yen and He-Chen. The defensive wall was instantly shattered. Arbor's little face was bone-chillingly cold, he anxiously rushed to Mo Yen's side. The humanoid sacred beast seemed to have sensed something and turned his head, seeing Arbor holding the Fushi greatsword coming at him, his eyes couldn't help but shrink. He had already experienced the power of the sacred weapon just now. Now, there was still a terrible pain in his tailbone. When he saw the Fushi greatsword, there was only one thought in his mind, I can't let this sword fall on me again. I can't let the little girl use the Fushi greatsword to cut me again, I feel that the Fushi greatsword's power is far more than this. Arbor's sword light flashed, his little face full of hostility. When the sword fell on his head, the ground suddenly shook violently. The upper body of the snake man in front of him expanded by several feet, with a wave of his hands, the glaciers in the underwater abyss actually shattered in an instant. Like the explosion of a star, countless ice dots came straight at him. Mo Lien's eyes shrank, he hurriedly tore open space and quickly moved to Arbor's side, blocking this fierce attack for him. His body swayed a few times. Arbor hurriedly reached out, just as he was about to support his body, he suddenly felt a suction force suddenly lifting his whole body up. Looking carefully, it turned out that it was because Mo Lien's body was suddenly rolled up by the snake man's tail. And because he was firmly holding onto Mo Lien's arm, he was also dragged towards the entrance of the underwater abyss where the snake man was standing. Arbor's eyes flashed with a trace of fury, hanging on to Mo Lien's body, he whispered in her ear, "I'll send all of you into the star domain later, I'll explode a nameless star, the shock force may cause the star domain to be unstable. But don't be nervous, Chochio will." Before he finished speaking, he felt his whole body being pulled down rapidly. At the entrance of the underwater abyss, the bottomless ice cave was like a monster opening its huge mouth, biting towards the two of them. At first, the snake man only wanted to suck Mo Lien into the underwater abyss, he didn't want to go in together. It wasn't easy to escape from Mo Lien's ancient Mo Lien realm, the snake man had a trace of fear of this kid in front of him, he only wanted to trick Mo Lien. But then he found that things were out of his control. There was an irresistible natural suction force in the abyss. Once a person entered the ice cave, they would be pulled down involuntarily. There was no way to resist that force. While the humanoid divine beast was stunned, he couldn't help but be at his wit's end. At this moment, a pure white color appeared in Xiao Mu's eyes. The entire world was now covered in the white light of the glacier. She reached out and hugged Mo Lien's neck tightly, a guarded expression on her face. Mo Lien couldn't help but feel a little helpless, he looked at her and said, "Jojo. We'll be together wherever we go." Arbor reached out and knocked him on the head. "You can't leave me behind again." "Okay, we'll go wherever you want." Mo Lien sighed helplessly, his voice gentle. Arbor's heart calmed down a little. As long as she was with Jojo's lotus, no matter how difficult the situation was, it could be resolved. "Jojo." Mo Lien reached out and stroked her hair. Chapter 47-41. Don't worry. Mo Lien smiled at her and stroked her cheek. "I will protect you." How could she not be worried? Arbor stared at Mo Lien, who was just inches away from her, with a guarded expression. "If you abandon me again, I will never pay attention to you again." "Okay, I'll do as you say, I'll do as you say." His gaze lingered on her face for a split second, and his phoenix eyes flickered as if there were starlight swimming in them. Arbor hung on to him and breathed a sigh of relief in her heart when she heard him say this. It was fine as long as this guy didn't abandon her. In any case, she would follow him wherever he went. This ice cave in the underwater abyss was like a bottomless pit. After the two of them fell for a long time, they could only hear the sound of wind whistling by their ears. White light flickered before their eyes, and they couldn't see their surroundings clearly at all. The little stoic wanted to move her head, but she suddenly felt a strange pain assault her. Her conscience was violently shaken, and her entire body couldn't help but stiffen. Mo Lien took in all of her abnormality. He raised his hand to press down on her head, his tone still gentle as he said, "Xiao Xiao, your soul isn't very stable. Forcing yourself in will cause fatal damage to your conscious pool. You've absorbed the power of deprivation in this underwater abyss, but the remaining mysterious power has the effect of divine sense attacks. This power will cause space to tear and become unstable. You should have felt it. The divine sense attacks surging from all directions will injure your conscious. You won't be able to withstand it in your current state." Arbor covered his mouth with her hand and glared at him with her round eyes. "I'm not leaving." Her heart started beating wildly for some reason. However, Mo Lien smiled gently at her and pulled down her small hand, rubbing his lips against her palm. Jojo's conscience might be strong, but your soul isn't stable. If you continue to force yourself like this, it will cause great harm to you. I can't watch you get hurt, he whispered next to her ear. Let's make a promise, okay? I will come find you. This seabed abyss can't trap me. Even the Tower of Punishment couldn't trap me, let alone this place. Swindler, Xiao Mu was extremely flustered. She clutched his clothes with both hands and glared at him with her round eyes. What do you want to do? I won't leave. I won't leave you. Jojo, listen to me. I won't listen, I won't listen. After I deal with that stinky snake, I'll catch him and give him to you. I don't want anything. I want you to stay by my side. Arbor had a bad feeling, because Mo Lien was holding her waist with one hand, and an irresistible force was being emitted from his body. He was going to throw her out. Mo Lien. She felt an immense sense of panic. It was different from the time when she was captured in the Tower of Punishment. That time, she knew that Mo Lien had been captured by the heavenly axiom to be punished. There was always a chance for her to escape. But this time, it wasn't as simple as it seemed. In this seabed abyss, she didn't know what kind of danger was waiting for him. The sacrificial sea abyss was able to trap that human-shaped sacred beast for so many years. How would she know if it would trap Mo Lien as well? She couldn't afford to gamble and didn't want to gamble. She only wanted to be by his side, wherever they went. However, how could Mo Lien just watch as she became a target and suffered the attacks of the mysterious power in the seabed abyss? If her conscience couldn't withstand it, then he couldn't either. Don't be afraid, Mo Lien whispered in her ear. Chapter 47-42. I'll send you up. Just follow the path and keep going forward. Do you still remember the star I gave you? If the path is too dark, take out the star and shine it on it. Although I'm not by your side, my heart will definitely accompany you all the way out. I don't want it, I don't want it. Arbor hung on to him tightly. She hugged his neck and shouted anxiously and angrily, I don't want it, I don't want it. She didn't want to leave his side at all. No. Mo Lien lowered his head and kissed her heavily on the lips. Then, without waiting for her to refute, he immediately sent her soft body up. Arbor's eyes widened slightly. She felt an irresistible push coming from below her waist. Mo Lien said he was going to send her up. How could she resist? That huge force instantly pushed her away from his side. The last thing Arbor saw was Mo Lien's rapidly sinking figure. At the same time that he used the force to send her up, his body accelerated and slid down in the opposite direction. This big liar. He tricked Lord Jojo again. Arbor followed Mo Lien's pushing force and rose up involuntarily. This pushing force lasted for a quarter of an hour before it slowly disappeared. Arbor's figure didn't fall down. Instead, she stopped in midair. It was pitch black in front of her. She couldn't see the way out. Arbor didn't even think and jumped down. As a result, her body crashed into something with a dong sound. She raised her hand to touch it. It felt like something intertwined with green vines below her. She hurriedly reached out and hammered it a few times. She couldn't move it at all. Maybe it would be better if she took out a divine hammer and hammered it. Arbor hurriedly reached out to take something out of her inner world. This time, she discovered that because she had been attacked by the mysterious power of the underground abyss before, her conscience was still unstable. She couldn't even open her inner world. Arbor unfolded a wisp of blue spiritual fire in her hand. She wanted to burn a hole in the vines below her. However, after burning for a long time, he touched it and found that it was still a crisscrossing mess. His little bit of fire was not enough to burn the things that covered the ground below him. The little stoic walked dejectedly in the darkness for a while, feeling like she had landed on a circular platform. Since she couldn't go down, she could only continue to go up and see if she could think of another way to go down. Arbor's body gently leaped upwards without any hindrance. When his fingers touched an icicle, Arbor subconsciously climbed up. His body gently landed on the protruding icicle and took 2 deep breaths. His head hurt terribly, and he felt weak all over. At the bottom of the seabed abyss, he was indeed injured by that divine sense attack. The little guy took out a storage talisman from his sleeve and wanted to take out a luminous pearl. But after trying for a long time and finding that it was useless, he couldn't help but feel a little anxious. In the abyss of the sacrificial sea, even storage talismans couldn't be used. In the past, when she went out to train, she had never been as miserable as she was now. The surroundings were too cold, and she felt a bit cold. Standing on that protruding icicle, she felt a bit drowsy. I still have to find Jojo's lotus. Arbor muttered in his mind. He curled up his body and leaned against the cool ice wall. That icy touch couldn't extinguish the anxiety and worry in his heart. His body suddenly moved as he recalled what Mo Lien said to him earlier. Do you remember the star I gave you? Chapter 47-43. Why did he say this? Was it because he already knew that her conscience was severely shaken and that she couldn't use her divine conscience or even talisman energy for the time being? A heart. That's right, Mo Lien gave her a star on her birthday at the Royal Academy. Her pentagram necklace. Arbor pulled out a silver necklace from around her neck and held it in her palm. The pendant of the necklace was a pale pentagram, and the soul-calming frost jade was also hanging from it. The moon-shaped jade pendant circulated with a faint luster, reflecting the splendor of the stars beside it. The stars accompanied the moon, and the moon reflected the stars. Arbor's fingers gently caressed this star and moon. As soon as she let go, that aqua-silver pentagram leaped up in front of her eyes and emitted a gentle light. The pitch-black darkness in front of her was instantly dispersed by the light. Tiny mimicry stars leaped up everywhere, instantly illuminating this area with incomparable splendor. The little stoic reflexively closed her eyes. When she opened them again, she could clearly see the landscape of this place. Sure enough, she was standing on an ice prism protruding horizontally from the ice wall. All around her were ice boulders and ice walls. She couldn't see the end of the ceiling, and not far below her, countless old vines and vines had sealed off her path. Arbor's heart thumped fiercely. She suddenly scooped up the pentagram next to her and leaped down, landing in that area of interwoven vines again. Rotten peach blossom. Arbor suddenly shouted loudly and pounded on the path sealed by the wood spirit twice. She couldn't go down. The venerable peach blossom immortal had used countless layers of wood spirit seals to seal off her path. Even if she was at her peak, she couldn't open a seal set up by a venerable immortal, let alone now when her body was on the verge of collapse. A sense of powerlessness welled up in her heart. The most frightening thing was that when she was sent up by Mo Lien's force just now, she should have brushed past rotten peach blossom in the pitch-black cave. After she was thrown up by that force, rotten peach blossom set up layer after layer of wood spirit seals on her path, completely sealing off her path down. The two of them didn't even discuss it with her and acted on their own accord. They even cooperated with each other decisively and perfectly, leaving her in this mediocre place. Scoundrel! Scoundrel! Arbor patted the seal with reddened eyes and muttered, Mo Lien, rotten peach blossom, where did you go? Mo Lien, rotten peach blossom, get back here. She used her fingers to dig at the old vine that was as hard as iron. She sat there in a daze for a while before muttering to herself, I'm going up now. I'm going up to look for someone. I can't open this with spirit seal, but little Taisui and the others should be able to. Yes, find little Taisui and the others. Arbor jumped up, holding a star in his hand and shining it above. She didn't know how long it had been since she fell into the bottomless pit of the sacrificial sea. Now when she looked up, she could see no light at the mouth of the cave, as if all the light had disappeared at the bottom of the icy cavern. Damned heavenly Tao. If anything happens to my disciple, I'll use your dog life to pay for it. You clearly know that she can't possibly be in any danger. Heavenly Tao rolled his eyes anthropomorphized. He put his hands on his hips and stood in front of Xian Huang. His little body was straight, and his little face was filled with solemnity. Life requires experience. If you don't experience it, how can you become stronger? In the past, when you went out for experience, didn't you go through so many difficulties and hardships? Chapter 47-44. Isn't the reason why you reached this height today because you can face any difficulties and hardships? A strict teacher produces a brilliant disciple. Xian Huang was silent for a moment, and in the next second, she kicked Tian Dao away. It was true, but she could say such big words to other people's children, but she couldn't stand it when she saw her own child suffer. Tian Dao saw her turn and go in the direction of the sacrificial sea abyss and couldn't help but sigh sadly. Getting up and brushing off the non-existent dust on his body, Tian Dao's face was faintly sad. As long as Xian Huang doesn't smash the sacrificial sea abyss and destroy any space in this realm, then no matter what she does, I can turn a blind eye to it. Tian Dao didn't want to pay attention to Xian Huang at all. She turned her head and revealed the face of a young woman, glaring at the 13 sanctuary elders who were like quails. At this time, little Tai Sui and the others could also breathe a sigh of relief. Everyone was more or less injured. The injuries on Thin Monk's body were the most frightening. There was a sword wound on his back that was so deep that his bones could be seen. The Peony Fairy was pursing her lips and applying ointment for Thin Monk with a cold face. Her cold eyes swept over the 13 elders who kept their mouths shut from time to time. Do you know your crime? Tian Dao changed his cute and cowardly appearance in front of Xian Huang and put on a serious face and questioned coldly. Who allowed you to make your own decisions and secretly come to the Forgotten River realm? So many of you transcendent realms have come over, have you greeted this old man? One of the Forgotten River elders said boldly, We didn't come here on our own. We were summoned here. Yes, just like the God-inviting talisman we abided by the laws of the heavenly Tao, ha. Tian Dao snorted coldly. With a raise of his hand, a purple-red lightning turned into a whip shadow and tightly wrapped around the neck of the Transcendence Elder. Little Tai Sui and the others were shocked and looked in the direction of Tian Dao. At this moment, they were also feeling a little uneasy. Unfortunately, they were also a group of Transcendent Realm experts. What was even more unfortunate was that they were a group of Transcendent Realm experts who had escaped from the Punishment Tower. If even Transcendents could not come to this continent, strictly speaking, they should have ascended to the Holy Realm long ago. How dare you quibble with me? Tian Dao put one hand on his waist and made the shape of a teapot. He glared at the 13 sanctuary elders and reprimanded them as if he expected better from them. Your trip here has already caused instability in the Forgotten River realm. It's completely against the rules of the heavenly Tao. The secret technique you're using is a sinister technique left behind by the Dragon Clan of Forgetfulness to summon their ancestors. It can't be considered a proper deity-inviting talisman. The God-inviting talisman can only summon one saint-level cultivator at a time. What about you? You guys came in a group the moment you came. Who the hell could stand it? With so many transcendent realms coming, it's impossible for me to turn a blind eye to it. The elder who had the lightning whip wrapped around his neck wanted to push the whip away in fear, but he could not do so for a long time. Venerable one, the elder stammered. We know our mistakes now. Please let go of me. I swear that for the rest of my life, I will never interfere in the affairs of the juniors of the Forgotten River again. I will never step into the Forgotten River again. It's too late. Chapter 47-45. You trespassed into the Wangchuan realm and caused the realm here to become unstable. You must bear the consequences, Heavenly Tao said coldly with an ugly expression. The serious expression on this fellow's face made everyone's heart beat like a drum. There was a world of difference between the mental state of the 13 elders from the sanctuary and the mental state they were in now. The more arrogant they were before, the more cowardly they were now at their current position. As long as they didn't court death, they wouldn't die. But now, from the looks of it, the heavenly Tao wanted to punish them. Who wouldn't panic? The elder whose neck was wrapped by the lightning whip hurriedly took a few steps back and begged for mercy with a bitter expression. Supremacy, please forgive us. We were really summoned here by someone. If we were wrong, we were just careless. Splash. Long Shangyun and Long Huan emerged from the bottom of the sea one after another and saw the confrontation between the two sides. Long Shangyun's heart skipped a beat. She put down the coffin she was carrying with one hand and pinched Long Huan with the other, using her eyes to tell him not to spout nonsense later. Heavenly Tao's small body was standing in the air. Opposite him were 13 elders standing in a row like quails. Little Taisui, Dao Wuji, and the others were all healing their injuries. When they heard the commotion, they hurriedly turned to look. When they saw that only Long Shangyun and Long Huan came out, disappointment flashed through their eyes. Recover quickly. Come down with me to see what's going on, little Taisui said to Dao Wuji, a hint of worry lingering in his heart. To be honest, the trembling of the earth and mountains below was truly worrisome. He wondered how Jojo and the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal were doing. The latter's cheeky expression changed and he nodded at him with a serious expression. Yes. Supremacy. The sanctuary elder turned and saw Long Shangyun and Long Huan. His face tightened and he hurriedly called out to them, "Where's your grandmother? Let Long Qian come out and explain." Supremacy, we did cross the boundary this time, but there's a reason for this. We were also deceived. I thought that the secret summoning technique that Dragon Clan leader used was just like the god descending talisman. It was within the scope of the heavenly Tao's permission. Long Shangyun's eyes flickered as she stared coldly at the elder in front of her. With an indifferent expression, she said, "Elder, are you trying to push all the blame onto our clan leader? Useless things. So many people came, but they still couldn't solve the problem of Arbor." Only now did she truly regret that she had summoned this group of useless trash to the river of forgetfulness. Not only did she tire herself out, she had also caused her own body to be destroyed. Now, she could only possess another body to be reborn. Her granddaughter's body simply couldn't withstand her powerful divine soul. In less than 2 hours, her body would directly collapse. By then, if her soul could not be reborn from a new body, it would turn into ashes. This was obviously not what Long Qian wanted to see. Where is Long Qian? Ask her to come out and explain herself. That elder said angrily. In fact, it was indeed her who used a secret technique to summon us here, wasn't it? Now that something like this had happened and even the heavenly Tao had been alerted, someone had to take responsibility for this. There was no other person other than Long Qian. Long Shangyun's face contorted slightly. Before Long Huan could speak, she fiercely grabbed his hand. Chapter 47-46. Long Shangyun said sternly, "Clan leader Long has died in the abyss." What? Impossible. Clan leader Long really died in the abyss of the sacrificial sea? Little Taisui and the others looked at Long Shangyun in confusion and frowned. How could Long Qian die so easily? Little Taisui and the others didn't quite believe it. Long Qian looked like a scheming person who could even plot against her own daughter and granddaughter. She didn't look like someone who would die in the sea. Besides, Jojo and the others hadn't come out after so long, but Long Shangyun and Long Qian had come back up. This made little Taisui and the others feel even more uneasy. The peony fairy swallowed a pill and looked at Long Shangyun and Long Qian coldly. "Where's Jojo?" Long Shangyun said coldly, "Mu Qiao has fallen into the abyss. She can't come back up. So what was the point of her gathering so many elite disciples of the duo clan of Wangchuan and specially summoning the 13 elders of the sanctuary? In the end, it was all because of her, Long Qian, who used a secret technique to awaken the humanoid sacred beast in the abyss. Only then did she get rid of that troublesome guy in arbor. So what was the point of her scheming and painstaking efforts to get these useless people to come to Wangchuan? They couldn't help at all. Not only that, but they also wanted her to take the blame and bear the wrath of the heavenly Tao. Ha! What a whimsical idea. Little Taisui's eyes narrowed. He stood up and glared at Long Shangyun. Who are you? You're not Long Shangyun. Long Shangyun was stunned. Long Qian was also shocked. He didn't expect that the little celestial, who was always by Jojo's side and didn't speak much, could recognize that Long Shangyun wasn't the real Long Shangyun. Long Qian, you took over your own granddaughter's body. Little Taisui looked at Long Qian in shock, his eyes filled with confusion. This woman was indeed a ruthless woman. Not only was she heartless to her own granddaughter, she was even ruthless to her own granddaughter. No wonder Long Shangyun's face was as pale as a dead person. Long Shangyun wouldn't be able to withstand Long Qian's powerful spiritual soul. She would kill her granddaughter with her own hands. Grandmother. Long Yen finally could not hold back his tears as he cried out miserably, I beg you, quickly come out of Xiang Yun's body. She can't hold on any longer. Long Qian was furious. One by one, 2 by 3, all of them wanted to go against her. He really wished that a bolt of lightning would descend from the sky and strike these unfilial grandsons and granddaughters to death. Boom! Thunder roared. Long Qian's entire body tensed up. She raised her hand and threw something out, blocking the lightning that was falling from the sky. With a loud crack, the lightning struck the item that Long Qian had thrown out and split it apart. Only then did everyone see clearly that it was a top-notch coffin. However, at this moment, the coffin had already been split open by the power of the heavenly lightning. A young woman rolled out from within and landed heavily on the ground with her face facing the ground. Sister Shui Yuan. Long Qian's shrill voice echoed in everyone's ears. The woman who was lying on the ground was covered by the power of lightning that was as thin as a snake. Her entire body was slowly being torn apart by the power of the lightning. A terrifying scene played out in front of everyone. It turned out that at the critical moment, the old woman felt that the heavenly lightning was about to strike her body, so she kicked. Chapter 47-47. She immediately kicked Long Shuyuan's coffin away. At such a critical moment, Long Qian didn't have time to think about it. Her brain immediately reacted. She used Long Shuyuan to block the attack. After a few minutes, Long Shuyuan's body was torn to pieces by the lightning. His soul was shattered into pieces, and he couldn't be reassembled no matter what. Long Qian was stunned for a moment before he turned to Long Qian and shouted, Grandmother. You. She said that she wanted to find the 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl to repair Long Shuyuan. In the end, it was all an excuse. When she kicked Long Shuyuan out to block the lightning, why didn't she think that Long Shuyuan was the future hope of the River of Forgetfulness? When she sent Long Shuyuan to his death, why didn't she think about Long Shuyuan's contributions to the River of Forgetfulness? Who did Long Shuyuan offend? Even after death, he couldn't rest in peace and was struck by lightning until he turned into ashes. At this moment, her grandmother didn't feel bad for the River of Forgetfulness for losing a great prophet and a cultivator with great talent. Long Qian's expression was a little awkward as she raised her head and looked at Tian Dao vigilantly. If Tian Dao hadn't attacked her without any explanation, she wouldn't have subconsciously kicked Long Shuyuan's coffin out to block it. How could she be blamed for this? This was an instinctive action, okay? Little Taisui looked at the old lady with disdain. You're too disgusting. At this moment, the 13th elder also reacted. He quickly pointed at Long Qian and said, "Venerable One, it's her. She summoned us." Tian Dao only looked at them coldly. "You are the main culprits, and she is an accomplice. She will also be punished by Tian Dao." The 13 elders' expressions changed at the same time. 2 of the elders hurriedly turned around and fled into the distance. Their speed was very fast. In just a moment, everyone saw 2 small black dots on the sea as they shot away. Tian Dao didn't even bat an eyelid. It was formless, colorless, and tasteless. Anything in the world could be him and not him. Any drop of water in the sea could be him and not him. This was Tian Dao. These 2 elders were too laughable. Escape? Where could they escape to? Where did they belong? The heavenly Tao looked down on them coldly and said solemnly, "According to the rules of the heavenly Tao, this sovereign will punish you with 99 bolts of heavenly thunder. Those who can withstand the 99 bolts of lightning and maintain their undying bodies will be considered to have overcome this tribulation. I won't pursue this matter in the future." The faces of the Saint Domain elders turned ashen, their faces ashen. 99 heavenly thunders. Back then, during the 5 spirits' reincarnation, the heavenly thunder would at most strike down 9 times before stopping. At that time, they were struck to the point where they were on the brink of death, vomiting blood incessantly, losing more than half of their lives. But now the heavenly Tao actually said that it would send down 99 lightning punishments. Not everyone could be like Arbor, who could withstand the lightning bolts and jump around. Not everyone could be like Jojo and be tolerated by the heavenly axiom over and over again. Who had the ability to withstand 99 bolts of heavenly lightning tribulation without dying? It wasn't like he had an indestructible body made of iron. Even if they had risen to the transcendent realm now, they were still humans. Boom! A soul-shaking sound of thunder came from afar. In the blink of an eye, bolts of heavenly lightning struck the surface of the sea one after another, producing loud sounds. Tian Dao looked expressionlessly at the elders whose faces were ashen. With a flick of his finger, the 2 elders who had already flown far away were like chicks who had been grabbed by the back of their necks. Chapter 47-48. It was as if an invisible palm had pulled them all the way back from afar and flung them heavily to the ground. The heavenly lightning halos circled around the 2 of them. Everyone looked down and saw the sizzling power of lightning circling around the 2 of them, gradually climbing up to their necks. Suddenly, it rushed towards their faces. It was as if a lightning bolt had opened up on their faces, creating a long crack. The 2 elders' faces cracked from their chins to their foreheads. It was a tragic sight. Everyone silently looked away. They were shocked to find that Tian Dao was incomparably cruel. Although he acted cute on the outside, they did not expect him to be so ruthless. When he taught people a lesson, it was really impossible to guard against him. When the other elders of the sanctuary saw this, they were so frightened that their faces turned pale. At this moment, they were extremely regretful. Why did they listen to Long Qian's summons and come down to the river of forgetfulness from the sanctuary? If they continued to stay in the sacred region, diligently practicing their martial arts, and diligently cultivating their realms, then it would be impossible for an accident to offend Tian Dao in 10,000 years. Now, everyone was in a difficult position and regretted their actions. When Xian Huang found her beloved disciple, this little fellow was struggling to climb up. "Master!" When Arbor saw her, her eyes lit up. "Xiao Bao, don't worry. Master will bring you out now." Her gaze suddenly fell on her hand. "You took back Fushi?" Arbor nodded. Her body had reached its limit and could not support the power of the Fushi sword. She had already taken it back. "Xiao Bao, your soul." Xiao Mu didn't wait for Xian Huang to finish reciting before flying to her side and shaking her arm forcefully. "Master, Rotten Peach Blossom has set up a seal barrier below. Can you help me remove it?" Xian Huang looked at her little disciple's expression and could not help but feel uneasy. His little disciple's face was as calm as water, but the anxiety in his eyes couldn't lie. She was burning with anxiety. Xian Huang nodded and followed her to the wood spirit seal wall. While unlocking the seal, she consoled her little disciple, Xiao Bao, the natural suction force in the abyss under the sea is not something that one or two people can deal with. You don't have to blame yourself. Arbor nodded and lowered his little head, his eyes fixed on the wood spirit seal that his master had opened. It had been opened. A crack had been created in the seal by his master's sword. From the center of this crack, countless spiderweb-like cracks appeared, shattering the entire seal in a matter of minutes. Such tyrannical power. Arbor took a deep breath and looked down. Even though she had mentally prepared herself, when she looked down and saw a bottomless ice reflected in her eyes, the little stoic's heart still crumbled. Nothing. There was nothing left. The rotten peach blossom and Jojo's lotus were gone. Who knew if they had gone down tens of thousands of meters? In any case, with her eyesight, she couldn't see the end of this ice cave. Little treasure. Xian Huang called out to her worriedly. This fellow's eyes were vigilant, ready to prevent the little fellow from jumping down if she took things too hard. Arbor looked up and forced a smile at Xian Huang. That smile was as ugly as a wooden carving, as if a strange mark had been carved on a wooden face. Xian Huang's heart tightened, and she reflexively grabbed Arbor. Little treasure, don't worry. Wait here. Master will go down and see what's going on. Chapter 47-49. Arbor nodded obediently. Okay. Xian Huang was truly worried when she saw that her condition wasn't good. She squeezed her small hand and said, "How about you go to the surface first and wait for Master?" Xian Huang looked at this child's expressionless face and knew that her heart was in turmoil. She absolutely couldn't be as calm and peaceful as she appeared on the surface. When she thought of heavenly law's many obstructions just now and then looked at her little disciple's expression, she really wished she could drag heavenly law over and give it a good beating. Those little friends of yours are all waiting for you up there. The little stoic was silent for a moment before peeking at her master. When Xian Huang saw this, she patted her head. Don't worry. Although this abyss of the sacrificial sea is bottomless, it can't hurt your master. Come, I'll send you up first. Xian Huang pulled Arbor's hand. Arbor instantly felt a tremendous force coming from below her, and she involuntarily flew up with her master. It felt like she was flying, but it also felt like she was tearing apart space bit by bit and teleporting over. Xian Huang was extremely fast. In a flash, she sent Arbor to the glacier entrance of the sacrificial sea abyss. Due to the huge earthquake just now, the glacier at the cave entrance had completely collapsed. Xian Huang shattered the ice that blocked their way and pulled the little stoic out of the cave entrance. Only then did the little stoic realize that the seawater only lingered around the sacrificial sea abyss and didn't pour into the cave entrance at all. Thus, she couldn't see a single drop of water below the glacier. Child. Xian Huang rubbed the little stoic's head and exhorted softly, swim up. Master will go down to take a look. I'll come up to find you soon. The little stoic nodded obediently again. She stared at Xian Huang's figure diving into the sacrificial sea abyss for a while before turning around and following the current to swim up to the surface. At this time, the seawater had already recovered its ice-cold temperature and was no longer shockingly scalding. Perhaps it was because the glacier emerged from the bottom of the sacrificial sea abyss, but the temperature of the seawater here was much lower than the surrounding currents. A trace of coolness lingered in Arbor's heart, but it couldn't suppress the fire in her heart that flared up. Long Qian. Today's matter was fundamentally caused by this deranged old woman. What kind of hatred did this old woman have for her to be so eager for her to die? In order to deal with her, he even went as far as to summon the freakish holy beast of the undersea abyss. Just to kill her in one fell swoop. A cold light flashed in Arbor's eyes. He kicked his legs and quickly swam towards the surface of the sea. 13 elders from the sacred region. 2 of them were captured by the heavenly Tao during their escape and were destroyed by humanity. As for the other 11 elders, they were currently suffering a fate worse than death. They had no idea how many bolts of heavenly lightning there were. Their flesh was torn and their bodies were charred black. They were locked in a realm by the heavenly Tao and could only endure the bolts of heavenly lightning. 28. Long Shi shuddered and counted in his heart. Among them, 2 elders had already fainted on the ground. However, the heavenly thunder would not sympathize with the elder who had fainted. They continued to strike the 2 pitiful fellows who had fainted on the ground until their bodies were riddled with holes and could no longer be repaired. Only then did they beat the gong to retreat. Long Qian's eyes flickered as she stood there. She stealthily took a step back, then another step back. Chapter 4750. If she didn't run now, when would she? Looking at the aggressive manner of the heavenly Tao, could it be that after settling the score with these elders, it would immediately look for him? Long Qian couldn't help but tremble when she saw the miserable state of the 13 elders after being struck by lightning. She could feel that Long Shangyun's body was on the verge of collapsing. It seemed like she had to find a chance to leave this place and find a suitable body before Long Qian turned around and was about to leave, but she met a pair of dark, cold eyes the moment she turned around. Xiao Mu just so happened to emerge from the seawater, and she immediately saw Long Shangyun facing her, her eyes filled with astonishment. This old woman used Long Shangyun's face to make such an expression. It was really disgusting. Get out of her body. Xiao Mu swam a distance in the sea before sensing that her divine conscience had returned by quite a bit. He took out a few attack talismans from his inner world and threw them at Long Shangyun without thinking. Now that he thought about it, there must be something wrong with the abyss of the sacrificial sea. That was why he felt his consciousness tremble when he fell into the bottomless glacier. Arbor took a deep breath and stared coldly at the person in front of him. Long Shangyun's body was Long Qian's soul. This old woman was now staring at Arbor with a twisted expression. It was as if she didn't expect Arbor to be able to climb out of the abyss at the bottom of the sea. This girl was really like a ghost. As Long Qian thought this, her gaze toward Xiao Mu became increasingly bizarre and twisted. How did you get out of there? Long Qian couldn't help but ask. Her voice was so sharp that everyone couldn't help but turn to look at her. Little Taisui and the others were originally paying attention to the elders who were suffering from the lightning tribulation. When they heard the conversation between Arbor and Long Qian, they were all delighted. Jojo was out, so they knew that their Jojo would be fine. Now, she only looked a little pale and didn't seem to be injured. Little Taisui quickly went to Arbor's side and looked up with a serious face. How are you? Xiao Mu looked down at him and shook her head, indicating that she was fine. Heavenly Tao also caught sight of the little stoic. This fellow looked behind her and didn't see Xian Huang, so his brows couldn't help but crease. He opened his mouth and asked seriously, "Where's Xian Huang? Why didn't she come with you?" Arbor didn't even look at him, as if he couldn't be bothered with him. The heavenly Tao could not help but feel a little stifled. He muttered to himself, "I'm so good to the little girl, but she still doesn't like me. I don't know why." "Little Taisui, take them to a place a little farther away," Arbor whispered to little Taisui. He raised his hand and pushed little Taisui lightly. Little Taisui's heart skipped a beat, and he immediately reacted. He turned his head to look around Arbor and subconsciously asked, "Why aren't your Lotus and Peach Blossom here?" Normally, when Lianhua and Lianhua heard little Taisui call them that, they would have jumped up and chased after him to beat him up. Now that he had been muttering to himself for a long time, other than noticing that the little stoic's expression was becoming more and more unsightly, he didn't see these 2 fellows. They'll be fine. Little Taisui immediately realized that he shouldn't have asked and hastily comforted him. "Don't worry. I'll go down with Endless Blade later to see what's going on." Chapter 47:51. Arbor gently nudged his small body again and used her eyes to signal for little Taisui and the others to move further away. It was time to settle this muddled debt with Long Qian. Arbor pursed her lips and remained silent. Her body hovered above the sea, and her icy gaze met Long Qian's trembling gaze. Then, she raised her hands slightly. At first, everyone couldn't react in time. Then, a disciple of the Wangchuan duo clan exclaimed, "See, waves. The waves are rising." Everyone turned their heads to look. Only then did they discover that on the distant horizon, monstrous wave was rolling up to a height of several hundred feet. The stormy wave was sweeping towards them at a rather terrifying speed. The little stoic's ability to control the water spirit was truly shocking. What are you going to do?" Long Qian's heart trembled, and her pupils violently contracted. So this was Long Qian's daughter. Even if they searched the entire Wangchuan, they probably wouldn't be able to control the Sea of Wangchuan to this extent. This Long Qian's daughter had mastered the power of the water spirit to the point of perfection. It was obvious that she could command the water spirit with a single breath and use it completely. Young Master Ding stood at the back of the crowd. When he saw Arbor's actions, his eyes involuntarily flickered. The little girl was the type to seek revenge for the smallest grievance. Just like back then, when he made her mother faint as a joke and then pretended to be her, it deeply infuriated this little stoic. She stabbed him in the chest like a knife. Now that Long Qian caused Mo Lian and He Shichen to fall into the bottomless abyss at the same time, it was obvious that the little stoic wouldn't let the main culprit, Long Qian, off. This was truly courting death. Ding Yun nonchalantly curled his lips, and a faint smile flitted through his eyes. "What are you doing?" Long Qian watched as the monstrous wave came closer and closer to them, and a trace of fear involuntarily arose in her heart. This girl couldn't be thinking of summoning the power of the sea to punish the entire Wangchuan, right? Was this possible? Could she fight the entire Wangchuan realm with her strength alone? The head of the Wangchuan duo clan, Duo Chang, was so frightened that his legs turned to jelly, and he nearly fell to the ground. Looking at the huge wave in front of him, Duo Chang had a bad premonition that a disaster was about to befall him. What kind of stupid thing did he do with the Dragon Clan leader of the Forgotten River Dragon Clan? Duo Chang's face paled as he looked at the incoming wave. He hurriedly activated his defensive barrier and roared, "Get ready. What should I prepare?" As if they were facing a formidable foe, everyone activated their defensive equipment and waited for the instant the little stoic's torrential wave came crashing down. However, just as everyone was mentally prepared to give up, the monstrous waves suddenly stopped. The meandering wave drew an arc in the air and stopped right above everyone's heads. Some of the unlucky ones standing at the front could see a drop of water breaking away from the huge wave and slowly dripping down. Everyone's heart clenched tightly. It was like having a sharp sword hanging above their heads, and no one knew when it would fall. This was much more unbearable than falling behind already. The waves were suspended in mid-air, as if they were about to fall. The rolling waves stopped uniformly in front of everyone, making them feel a huge threat coming head-on. Long Qian's heart was about to jump out of her chest. She gaped and looked at Arbor, dumbstruck. So this was the ultimate power of the 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl. It could control an entire body of water. It could raise monstrous waves so easily. Chapter 47:52. Let's talk things out. Long Qian's heart thumped wildly. Heavenly Dao's eyelids also kept twitching, and he hastily stopped her. "Little miss, don't act recklessly. Your master should be in the seabed abyss right now, right? It's not impossible to get these people back up." Arbor glanced at him coldly. "Are you sure?" Heavenly Dao was instantly terrified and couldn't utter a single word because of the little stoic. Of course, he couldn't guarantee that the natural suction of the sacrificial sea's abyss had already pulled those two brats to God knows where. The bottom of the abyss was endless and connected to an unknown number of mysterious hidden spaces. Even Dark Phoenix, who could control the power of space, would find it difficult to find them within an hour. An hour later, he was going to kick Xian Huang back. Of course, this was only Heavenly Dao's wishful thinking. As for who would be kicked out in the end, Heavenly Dao himself didn't know either. The little stoic despised Heavenly Dao even more. She glared at him icily, causing Heavenly Dao's heart to feel stifled. He clearly cherished the little miss so much, so why was the little miss unwilling to give him the slightest bit of respect? Her husband had clearly reached the conditions to ascend to the holy domain long ago, but he turned a blind eye to their fooling all day long. Wasn't this friendly enough? Right now, he was merely changing her husband's training location, so why was the little miss so angry? Back at the Tower of Punishment, they could all break out of prison. A place like the seabed abyss should also be able to write. Look at little Taisui and the others. They were clearly the prison guards of the Tower of Punishment, but they could still break out of prison together with others. He already didn't settle old scores with them, so wasn't he being nice enough? Heavenly Dao felt indignant. He turned around and saw the little miss waving her small hand. The raging waves in front of everyone froze into ice inch by inch, freezing half of the sea surface at an extremely fast speed. By the time Heavenly Dao reacted, he discovered that the little miss had completely frozen the rolling waves. With a bang, they shattered into powder. Heavenly Dao couldn't help but shout, "Defend!" He was so anxious that his voice cracked when he called out. The members of the Forgetful River Dragon clan and the Duo clan all turned pale with fright. They hurriedly activated their second and third layer defensive spiritual artifacts in an attempt to block the oncoming frozen powder. His entire body had been turned into a sieve by the tiny ice lumps. Duo Chang hurriedly took out a large number of defensive spirit artifacts from his inner world and activated them one by one. His pupils contracted, and the fear he felt was indescribable. "All of you stay here for me," the little stoic said coldly, her finger lightly pointing at the sky. "Run!" Long Qian finally understood what was going on. This stoic face was truly ruthless. She wanted to exterminate the remaining disciples of the River of Forgetfulness here. The originally dormant waves started rolling again, as if they were quickly lifted up by the power of her finger. They covered the sky and covered the earth as they chased after the crowd. Long Qian and the others jumped into the sea. As they swam, they couldn't help but look back. With just one glance, he could not move his eyes away. The water current behind them condensed into the shape of a transparent human figure. Arbor stood in front of this illusory figure formed by the water current and looked at Long Qian with an icy expression. With a tap of his finger, a large Fushi sword materialized in the water illusion's hand and slashed at Long Qian's back. Chapter 47-53. What kind of godly skill is this? Everyone was shocked as they stared fearfully at the wave that had taken the shape of a human. The waves formed a huge shadow that covered the sky and the sun, blocking out the sunlight in front of everyone. Arbor stood in front of the shadow and pointed his finger at it. A Fushi sword appeared in the hand of the shadow, and it slashed towards Long Qian's back. Long Qian was running for her life, but she couldn't avoid the shadow's attack. She thought that the little girl wouldn't be able to hurt her with her low-level divine realm cultivation. However, she forgot that this was Long Shangyun's body. With Long Shangyun's cultivation, there was no way she could block Arbor's attack. Her body fell forward into the sea. Long Qian spat out a mouthful of blood. Her body was soaked in cold water, and she shivered. Her soul was shaking, and her head was hurting. She couldn't hold it in. When she got out of the water, she spat out another mouthful of blood, and her face changed. Arbor looked at Long Qian, who was struggling in the water, expressionlessly. His eyes were filled with coldness. She and Long Qian were like fire and water. Their hatred was irreconcilable. If Long Qian still had some hope for Arbor in the beginning, as they got to know each other better, she no longer had any blood ties with Arbor. Forget about Arbor, just look at how she treated Long Shanyun. She had watched her granddaughter grow up, and she took over Long Shanyun's body just like that. She didn't even care if Long Shanyun's body would break. This cold-blooded woman wouldn't do such a thing to her grandchild, even if she had any feelings for her grandchild. Get out of the way. Long Qian gestured at the mermen around him. Everyone did not need him to remind them. They hid wherever they could. Some sharp-witted mermen had already sunk into the water and fled for their lives back to their homeland. There was only one thought in everyone's mind: get away from this little fiend. The farther, the better. He commanded the shadow formed by the waves and chased after Long Qian, who was trying to escape. Everyone's eyelids twitched. The shadow raised the sword in his hand and swung it down. Boom! Long Qian's back was hit by a wave, and she fell into the sea again. She didn't pop her head out of the water for a long time. Long Xia opened his mouth wide, unable to make a sound for a long time. In the blink of an eye, he saw Mu Xingchen rushing over with a solemn expression. Long Shi hurriedly said, "Co-cousin. Please persuade him." Mu Xingchen didn't even bother to look at Long Hua. Although I didn't see what happened in the abyss of the sacrificial sea, I can roughly guess what happened. Long Qian, ask yourself. Is what Long Qian did to Jojo fair? Does she still have any humanity? Cousin, you think I want to plead for grandmother? Long Huan could not help but laugh bitterly. I'm not shameless enough to plead for her again. I'm just worried about Shanyun's safety. Long Huan's face was full of worry. Shanyun won't be able to take it after being beaten up by cousin. She didn't know anything from the beginning to the end. She doesn't even know that I listened to my grandmother and came to the snow island to approach my cousin. Cousin, I hope you can persuade her. Please ask cousin to be merciful on account of the time she spent with Shanyun. Mu Xingchen coldly glanced at Long Huan and shook his head. You don't understand her. You've spent so much time with her, but you still don't understand her. Chapter 47-54. It's impossible for Jojo to take out her anger on others and kill the innocent. Mu Xingchen looked at Long Yun indifferently. Her actions won't hurt Long Shanyun. She probably just wants to drive Long Qian's soul out of Long Shanyun's body. Is that so? Delight flashed through Long Yun's eyes after his shock. However, Mu Xingchen no longer paid any attention to him. His gaze was fixed on his sister from afar. Sikong Fuling rushed to Mu Xingchen's side and humped softly. The little stoic is still the same. She gives people the feeling that she's very unreasonable. If you don't know her well, who would know her intentions? Mu Xingchen didn't speak. Sikong Fuling stole a glance at him and muttered, "There's a soft heart under that stoic face." I already knew when we were in the Mystic Beast Forest in the lower star domain. Although Mu Xingchen didn't say anything, a faint smile flashed through his eyes. On the other side, Long Qian's soul couldn't stay in Long Shanyun's body any longer after being slashed a dozen times by Arbor's figure formed from water. She hastily flew out. When Long Shanyun's body sank into the sea without her noticing, the wood spirit whip in Arbor's hand flashed and coiled around her body, pulling and flinging her. Long Shanyun's limp body was sent flying towards Long Huan. Long Yun hastily swam forward and caught his sister that Arbor tossed over. He glanced at Arbor with a complicated expression. Meanwhile, Long Qian's soul wanted to escape the instant it left her body. However, Arbor had already calculated and set up an isolation talisman formation the moment he pulled her soul out of Long Shanyun's body. No matter how good Long Qian was at escaping, she couldn't escape from her formation for the time being. Long Qian screamed anxiously. Her soul flickered in and out of existence in midair as if it would disappear completely in the next second. Heavenly Tao suddenly said, this person acted recklessly and used her clan's secret technique to secretly summon a holy region elder. This noble one must punish her. Arbor coldly rejected him. You're no longer needed here. Heavenly Tao, it felt like the little stoic was extremely disdainful of him. When it was time for you to go on stage, you dilly-dallied and didn't go on stage. When it's not your time to speak, you're randomly interrupting. The little stoic coolly swept a glance at Heavenly Law. She pointed with a finger, and that gigantic wave silhouette in midair abruptly descended. The illusory Fushi sword in his hand revealed a shapeless pressure that came from the ancient times, and it instantly shocked everyone present to the point they went perfectly silent. When Xian Huang jumped out of the abyss, her heart couldn't help but skip a beat. Looking at the little fellow's pale face and fluctuating spirit, he was secretly using the power of the Fushi greatsword again. Why was this child so worrisome? She couldn't stop worrying if she didn't take a look at him. By the time Dark Phoenix flew over, the sword under the little stoic's command had already heavily chopped down. The seawater immediately split open from the middle, as if it had been split into a cross-section. Between the two sections, the seawater gushed out like two waterfalls in the direction of the underwater abyss. Heavenly Tao wailed as he rushed forward, shouting, "Little stoic, you can't destroy things like this." Fuck, how could she take out a sage weapon and randomly chop it, splitting mountains and splitting seas, cutting a large fissure in the sea of forgetfulness? From the looks of it, he didn't know if he could patch up this large fissure even if he replenished it for 3 years, ha woo. The little stoic was too deceitful. Chapter 47-55. Arbor expressionlessly glanced at him. When Tiandao's eyes met her clear and cold moon-like eyes and her desolate expression, his heart couldn't help but sink. This little girl could it be that she wanted to exterminate the entire river of forgetfulness? This matter was serious. Tiandao was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan. He looked up and saw Xian Huang's head popping up. Quick, quick. Aya, you're finally back. Hurry and bring your brat back. I almost had a heart attack because of her. Quick, stop fooling around. Splitting mountains and splitting seas and diverting water to fill up the river of forgetfulness isn't a joke. Xian Huang grabbed the fussing Tiandao and sternly shouted, calm down. Fuck, who's the one who's restless now? It's your disciple. Tiandao's gaze abruptly landed beside the little stoic. Whose spirit is this? At this time, a spirit that was so faint it was almost transparent slowly popped out beside the little stoic. The little stoic recognized it at a glance. It was Senior Long Xuanji. When Long Qian saw Ancestor Xuanji appear, he immediately hid behind her and stammered, "Ancestor, save me." However, Senior Xuanji didn't even look at Long Qian. His gaze landed on the little stoic and he gently said, "Child, stop for now. Your soul is very unstable right now. Why aren't you retrieving this holy weapon?" Xian Huang frowned slightly and floated to her little disciple's side. She glanced suspiciously at Long Xuanji's soul and thought, this soul is already so faint that it's almost transparent. It should only be a small wisp of soul and will disperse after 15 minutes at most. The little stoic was a person who clearly distinguished gratitude and grudges. The one who had a grudge against her was Long Qian, while Long Xuanji had always treated her with kindness. This ancestor of the Xuanji family had played an indelible role in pushing her forward on the path of her growth. She couldn't act like she was indifferent to others. Hence, she put away the Fushi sword. However, the huge projection that was formed from the ocean currents was still in midair. It was just that it was frozen and motionless at this time, and not a single drop of water fell. The little stoic bowed respectfully to Long Xuanji and said to herself, "Senior, out of the 103 first-generation disciples of the Xuanji school, we've already found more than 80 people." Long Xuanji's eyes shone with gratification. He nodded and his tone became more relaxed. "Second sect master. Your whole family is stupid. He had said this in front of Long Xuanji's soul projection in the Xuanji mystic realm. Now that Long Xuanji had said this in front of his half-conscious soul, Senior Xuanji looked a little confused. Previously, in Senior Tianjizi's secret realm, I helped you teach Senior Tianjizi's disciple, Senior Tian Tuzi, a lesson. When Long Xuanji heard this, a trace of joy flashed across his eyes. Is that so? Good child, you really didn't waste the heavy responsibility I entrusted to you. You've completed so many things so quickly. As expected of the second-generation sect master of the Xuanji school. Wait a minute, she didn't seem to have come out to chat idly with the little stoic. She still had something important to say. Otherwise, her soul would dissipate with the wind. Strange, why was he inexplicably led astray by the little girl's words? Long Xuanji hastily organized his thoughts and said bluntly, Second sect master, please spare the merfolk in the land of forgetfulness. These disappointing things can't be helped by rotten mud, but they're still my clansmen after all. Chapter 47-56. Long Xuanji's words caused Long Qian's face to turn green and white. She opened her mouth to refute, but she saw Long Xuanji turn around and slap her. Slap! Long Qianmu was dumbfounded. She didn't expect that as a divine soul, she could feel a burning pain from her soul after being slapped by another soul. Long Qian, do you know your crime? Ancestor Xuanji chided her with a dark expression. The moment Ancestor Xuanji appeared, Long Huan and the Merman Juniors had already curled up their bodies and lowered their bodies to pay their respects in the sea. What crime have I committed? Long Qian shouted in dissatisfaction. Ancestor Long Xuanji had humiliated her, the leader of the dragon clan, just for a junior. How could she face the rest of the clan in the future? You are selfish. For your own selfish desires, you implicated the entire river of forgetfulness and the innocent mermaids. Long Qian was enraged. I didn't. You did. Long Xuanji interrupted her and said coldly, the 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl was left behind by our ancestors. It is indeed the most precious treasure of our mermaids. However, it was said when we left it behind. Only those who are capable will get it. Did you remember what I said? Did you take it to heart? Long Xuanji questioned sternly. Long Chuyun is your daughter. She is a very outstanding child. The 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl chose her. This is her fortune and her misfortune. Her misfortune is that she has such a self-righteous mother like you. Why did you insist that she contribute the 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl to the clan? Was it really just to follow your instructions and place the mermaid pearl in the clan so that the juniors could be baptized by the mermaid pearl at any time? You clearly know that for those children who are not talented, it is useless no matter how much you baptize them. The 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl will only have a negligible effect on them. This mermaid pearl will only have the greatest effect in the hands of the most talented person. Long Chuyun did not bury this 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl. She gave it to the most talented child in our clan, the second-generation sect master of the Xuanji sect. This matter should have ended here. It's because of your own selfish desires that you've caused such a huge disaster, bringing disaster to the entire river of forgetfulness. Every word that Long Xuanji said was like a gem. With every word that he said, Long Qian's face turned even paler. In the end, Long Qian could only open and close her mouth. She couldn't make a single sound. Long Xuanji shook his head. I know that you want to lead the entire river of forgetfulness back to its former glory. But in everything, one must act according to one's capabilities. Everything in the world must follow the will of the heavens. You also know that the descendants of the Forgotten River Dragon clan are not as talented as before. Is it really because the 10,000-year mermaid pearl is not in the clan? It's because you're rotten, you're useless. Although I hate your cowardice and stupidity, I have no choice but to stand up and beg for mercy in front of this little girl. Long Qian, you've been blinded by greed and selfishness. Because of some trivial matters, you secretly summoned the 13 ascended elders of the clan and caused them to lose their lives in the river of forgetfulness. I represent the ancestors of the dragon clan to take your life. Do you have any questions? At this moment, a short blade flew towards Long Qian. Senior Xuanji moved his finger, and the short blade pierced through Long Qian's soul. Chapter 47-57. Even though Long Qian reacted quickly and wanted to avoid it, there was nothing she could do. After being targeted by Long Xuanji's powerful spiritual soul, Long Qian had nowhere to run. She could only watch as the dagger pierced through her spiritual body. That bone-chilling cold caused her to feel a trace of panic for no reason. No, it was impossible. She couldn't have disappeared in the Wangchuan realm. She was Long Qian, the future and hope of the Wangchuan dragon clan. She was the dragon clan leader who could lead the Wangchuan dragon clan back to its peak. Long Qian was in a daze as she lowered her head mechanically. She couldn't hide the shock in her eyes as she watched herself shatter into pieces and disappear with the wind. She couldn't accept it. In the end, Long Xuanji only glanced at Long Qian indifferently, taking in the unwillingness in her eyes. Then he shook his head and couldn't help but sigh. He didn't expect the Wangchuan dragon clan to have a clan leader who was so determined to return to its peak. But was that possible? With the passage of time, there were many changes from generation to generation. It had been 300 to 400 years since the Wangchuan dragon clan reached its peak. No clan could boast that they would be able to prosper forever. Even the prosperous Divine Continent, Underworld Continent, and Song Continent could guarantee that their descendants would be able to prosper and last forever. It couldn't be. Everything could only follow the laws of heaven and follow the development of history. That was all. Long Xuanji couldn't help but shake his head. He took one last look at Long Qian's soul fragment before it disappeared into the sea. From today onwards, the remaining members of the Wangchuan dragon clan will be exiled to the Wangchuan Cold Valley. Ancestor Long Xuanji's cold words caused everyone to be slightly stunned. Long Huan. When Ancestor Xuanji said Long Huan's name coldly, the latter's body trembled. He quickly swam out from the group of mermaids and bowed. Junior Long Huan greets Ancestor Xuanji. Ancestor Xuanji nodded calmly. Your grandmother's mistake almost destroyed the entire Wangchuan dragon clan. Now that I have punished her, do you have any complaints? Long Huan shook his head blankly. Young Master Ding, who was standing not far away, watched all of this with cold eyes. When he saw Long Huan's reaction, a trace of interest flashed across his eyes. Who would have thought that this young Master Long would have such a day? Looking at his silly appearance, he was probably struck dumb by the series of blows he had received. His sister was possessed by her selfish grandmother. His grandmother had been killed by his ancestors. All the clansmen had to move to a barren land like the Cold Valley of Forgetfulness, and they would have to endure the torment of starvation and poverty all year round. The clansmen of the Dragon Clan of Forgetfulness were barely able to keep their lives. But what future did they have? What a huge joke. Young Master Ding's eyes flickered. With a faint and indifferent smile, he lowered his head slightly. If he could see the expression on Long Chuyu's face right now, it would definitely be quite interesting. What should he do? He seemed a little impatient. She really wanted to know how the high and mighty Madame Long would feel when she found out that she had been tricked by the old madam and would be sent to the cold valley of Wangchuan to dig for wild vegetables. The more she thought about it, the more interesting it was. While young Master Ding was gloating, Long Huan and the others' faces were ashen. They opened their mouths and wanted to plead for mercy on their behalf. Chapter 47-58. However, Ancestor Xuanji's words stopped them from begging for mercy. Between death and going to the cold valley of Wangchuan, which one do you prefer? There was no room for negotiation. That was the truth. Ancestor had sold her face and forcefully saved them from the stoic little girl. How could they continue to bargain? Long Qian turned towards Arbor. When he saw her looking back at him coldly, he couldn't help but sigh. Ancestor Xuanji waved at him. Long Qian walked over with his sister, Long Shangyun. Ancestor. Long Xuanji nodded. He reached out his transparent hand and patted Long Shangyun's neck a few times. Long Shangyun slowly woke up. She looked at her ancestor, who was as pale as glass, as if a lifetime had passed. Ancestor. Tears streamed down her face the moment she opened her mouth. After being possessed by her grandmother, her soul was like a bystander, silently watching everything unfold. She was very clear about what had happened to her body. It was just that she was powerless to stop her grandmother. She didn't know what to say now. All sorts of feelings welled up in her, and she was in a daze. Long Xuanji sighed and looked at her. You're called Long Shangyun. Long Shangyun nodded. Long Xuanji said, your body was possessed by Long Qian before. Although she was forced out by Jojo, she stayed in your body for a long time. Her soul is much stronger than yours, causing your body to show signs of collapse. Senior, is there any way to remedy this? Long Qian's tears flowed. He couldn't bear the pain and agony in his heart. He started to regret it. He regretted not listening to his father and believing his grandmother's nonsense. She said that everything was for the family. Only by saving Long Shuyuan would the Wangchuan dragon family have a future. But in the end, Long Qian personally pushed Long Shuyuan out to block the lightning and threw her to her death. Why didn't his grandmother think about it when she was on the brink of death? If she pushed Long Shuyuan to her death, there would be no future for Wangchuan. Senior Xuanji was right. Everything was his grandmother's selfishness. She kept arguing and saying that she wanted Long Chuyuan's aunt to return the 10,000-year-old mermaid pearl. In reality, who would the mermaid pearl end up in the end? Her. Everything was for her own sake. No matter how dignified she sounded, she couldn't absolve herself of her selfishness. Long Huan closed his eyes and knelt down in front of Long Xuanji, kowtowing heavily. Ancestor, please help Shangyun. The whole thing has nothing to do with her. She was just implicated by Wu Wang. Long Shangyun smiled bitterly and reached out to hold her brother's hand. Big brother, it's already a great fortune to be able to survive. There's no need for us to make things difficult for our ancestors. Long Xuanji sighed and turned to look at Arbor, waving at her. The little stoic walked over with a cold expression and didn't utter a word for a long time. Long Xuanji said, Second Sect Master, do you have anything to say about my arrangements? Arbor remained silent and looked at Long Xuanji indifferently. It was so long that Long Xuanji thought that Arbor was unwilling to speak. The little stoic spoke in an extremely cold voice. You already knew my identity when you gave me the 10,000-year-old Xuanji core back then. Long Xuanji shook his head and couldn't help but laugh. Little fellow, I'm not that resourceful. But speaking of which. Chapter 4759. This is a fate that can't be cut off. Ill-fated, Arbor said bluntly. If not, why would she fall out with the dragon clan of Wangchuan? Long Xuanji laughed and shook his head. Child, the dragon clan of Wangchuan went to the Cold Valley. They might not return in 10 or 100 years. Look, can you forgive them? Never. Arbor interrupted Senior Xuanji coldly. Senior, you've done me a favor. If you want me to let them go, I'll do as you wish. Xiao Mu stated coolly, but that's as far as you go. I have nothing to do with the dragon clan of Wangchuan. Senior, you've been gone for so many years. You should be relieved. What she meant was, Senior, don't interfere with the matters between the dragon clan and me. Long Qian had led people to chase after her. They had joined forces with the duo clan of Wang Chuan to kill her. They had even summoned a powerful sacred beast. They had failed to harm her, but they had caused Mo Yen and the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal to be in danger. How could she forgive them? That was strange. Now, it was only because Long Qian and the 13 elders of the holy region had been killed. Arbor could let go of the dragon clan of Wang Chuan, but it didn't mean that she could make peace with them. Long Xuanji was rendered speechless by the young lady's words. He nodded helplessly. Jojo. Long Xuanji sighed. I'm sorry. Arbor's eyes were cold. She didn't say anything else. She nodded slightly at Long Xuanji and turned to walk towards Xian Huang. Long Xuanji looked at her stiffened back and said softly to Long Huan, "You're on your own now." His silhouette slowly lost its brilliance and disappeared like the wind and clouds. Ancestor! Ancestor! Long Huan and the others called out. They watched as Long Xuanji's figure faded until there was nothing left. Arbor, whose back was facing Long Xuanji, clenched her fists tightly. She didn't turn around. Her ill-fated relationship with the dragon clan of forgetfulness had been completely resolved the moment she turned around. She didn't want to turn back, even if it was just to take another look at Long Xuanji. Everything was over. Even though Long Qian wasn't killed by her, she still died because of her. The 13 elders of the sanctuary had also died in the Sea of Forgetfulness because of Long Qian's summons. No matter what, the existence of this blood would stand between her and the dragon clan of Forgetting River. Arbor walked to Xian Huang's side and exchanged glances with his master. Xian Huang raised her hand and touched her head. Don't be sad, little treasure. Master, did you find it in the abyss of the sacrificial sea? Xian Huang looked at her for the entire night and nodded with a slightly solemn expression. It's so deep that you can't see the bottom. Xiao Bao, your divine soul is not stable. You must not go down. As soon as he finished speaking, the master saw that his little disciple looked like she was about to cry. She hurriedly reached out to pull Xiao Bao into her arms and stroked the child's fur. Xiao Bao, be good. Don't be sad. I've gone down to investigate. Even though that place is very strange, it's not a dangerous place for the two boys who fell down. Master, can they still come back? Of course. Xian Huang turned around and glared at the heavenly Tao as she spoke. The latter looked at her innocently with a helpless expression. What could the heavenly Tao say? The invisible suction force in the abyss of the sacrificial sea wasn't something it could control. Was it to blame? Chapter 4760. Xian Huang, things are almost done. Can you scram back now? Tiandao glanced at her and asked weakly. Xian Huang retorted, what's the hurry? Didn't he see that her little disciple's emotions were fluctuating? She was not at ease leaving her little disciple like this. Tiandao curled his lips and did not dare to be long-winded with Xian Huang. This fellow knew Xian Huang too well. If he irritated her with his chatter, he would definitely not have a good ending. The effect would be better if he did not overdo it. Xiao Mu tugged on Xian Huang's hand so tightly that it tugged at Xian Huang's heart. This child really made one's heart ache. If it was possible, Tiandao suddenly jumped in front of the two and smiled flatteringly. Xian Huang, you've been here for too long this time. If you don't hurry back, it will be difficult for me. Xian Huang glared at it angrily. Tiandao thought to himself, it's too difficult for me. If not for Xian Huang's gaze, he would not have jumped forward to interrupt. It was mainly because of Xian Huang. If she was unreliable, she would be more willful and unreliable than anyone else. She could not forcibly drag the little girl from this world to her world. Otherwise, it would really be a mess. Xian Huang glanced at Tiandao and snorted. Don't worry, my disciple has a family here. I can't take her away. Then she waved at Tian Dao with a face full of disdain. Go away. I want to say a few words to my disciple. Tian Dao curled his lips and quietly slipped to the side with a faint sadness of being disdained. A pair of small black eyes could not help but roll around. Xian Huang ignored the old fellow and pulled her disciple to the side. She whispered, "Little treasure, you've used the Fushi sword twice in a row. Your soul has been greatly damaged. You have to be obedient for a while. Don't use your divine sense too much. Can you listen to master?" Arbor nodded obediently, indicating that she had listened to her master's words. Xian Huang glanced at the soul-calming frost jade hanging around her neck. She reached into her bosom and took out a gourd-shaped medicine bottle and handed it to her little disciple. "Child, here is a soul-subduing pill. Take one a day for a month. It will help you repair your soul." Xiao Mu nodded her small head. "Master, are you leaving?" Xian Huang was stunned for a moment before she nodded. She raised her hand and patted the little fellow's head. "You must be well. Promise me that you will protect yourself well." Heavenly Tao had been secretly observing them for a while. At this moment, he hurriedly jumped up and smiled obsequiously. "Dark Phoenix, do you want me to send you on your way? Get lost, can't I walk on my own?" After Xian Huang finished speaking, she turned around and made a gesture to her little disciple. Then, she tore open the space in front of her and disappeared instantly. Heavenly Tao pursed his lips and mumbled to himself. He then hurriedly looked at the little girl with a grin. That stoic face. The little stoic ignored him and turned to say to little Taisui and the others, "I'm going to stay here for a while. Waiting for her lotus, waiting for rotten peach blossoms. Until they came back." Although little Taisui did not know what was going on, he still nodded. "Okay." Arbor called out to Mu Xingchen and put them all into the star domain. She turned around and was about to leave when she suddenly heard Long Shangyun say, "Cousin." Arbor originally wanted to leave without looking back, but she heard Long Shangyun say urgently, "You can make a trip to the Pool Lotus Sacred Realm. We once saw a wisp of Crown Prince Mo Lian's soul projection there." Chapter 47-61. Arbor's footsteps paused, and she turned to look in Long Shangyun's direction. The latter nodded slightly at her with a slightly bitter expression. Actually, as long as it's a cultivator who often goes to the Pond Lotus Sacred Realm, they should have seen it. I feel that if you go to Pond Lotus Sacred Realm and find the Crown Prince's soul, it should help you find where he is. Long Shangyun didn't say anything else. Arbor understood her meaning. If that really was Mo Lian's soul, then she might be able to contact Jojo's lotus. However, she didn't feel very hopeful about this. After all, from what she knew, Mo Lian's soul should be very complete. His knowledge pool had never been injured before, so he still didn't know what that wisp of soul was. But if it was only in terms of appearance. Arbor's gaze fell on Long Shangyun, and she stared for a while before saying, "So when you first saw Mo Lian, you acted so strangely." She remembered that when she saw Mo Lian back then, she had even looked at him a few more times in astonishment and had almost blurted out something to Long Huan. In the end, Long Huan pulled on his arm and he shut up. What Long Shangyun was surprised about was that she had seen a soul that looked very similar to Mo Lian in Pond Lotus Sacred Realm. "I'm sorry, cousin," Long Huan said in a low voice. "I've never told you about this. The soul that looks like Crown Prince Lian has always been wandering around Pond Lotus Sacred Realm. People who went to train would occasionally meet it once or twice. I've never told you before. It's because Pond Lotus Sacred Realm is the only place that is jointly guarded by the great clans of Forgotten River. Even if I told you, without the permission of the other clans, you wouldn't be able to enter that place. A year ago, an elder of the Forgotten River Duo clan wanted to refine this soul." Long Huan sighed. "However, in the end, he didn't come out of Pond Lotus Sacred Realm. After that, Pond Lotus Sacred Realm automatically sealed itself, and no longer allowed anyone to enter. That's why I didn't tell sister to tell you about it. It's useless even if I tell you. No one can enter now. Arbor was expressionless as he nodded at the siblings. Upon seeing this, Long Huan sighed lightly and cupped his hands at Xiao Mu. Farewell. Goodbye. Long Shangyun nodded weakly at the little crown princess. She seemed to be in a very bad mental state, and her face was exceptionally pale. The cold valley of the River of Forgetfulness this time was known as the most barren and difficult place in the River of Forgetfulness. They probably wouldn't be able to come out for the next 100 years. Thinking about it this way, Ancestor Xuanji's punishment of the Long siblings and the rest of the dragon clan was not light. Long Shangyun. Arbor suddenly called out to her. Long Shangyun turned around to look at her. Suddenly, she saw a white jade porcelain medicine bottle flying towards her. Long Huan hastily reached out to take it and glanced at Arbor in astonishment. He probably did not expect that this black-hearted little stoic would actually throw a bottle of medicinal pills to his younger sister. There are 30 soul-subduing pills in the jade bottle. You can take one every 5 days. It will more or less help you a little. Long Shangyun smiled at her. Her smile was slightly pale and did not have its usual radiance. Many thanks. Xiao Mu watched as the siblings left with their clansmen, and she only retracted her gaze after a long while. Looking back at the calm surface of the River of Forgetfulness, Arbor's eyes deepened. Chapter 4762. Since they planned to stay in the River of Forgetfulness for a while, Arbor discussed with Rong Qing and the others. They set up a defensive talisman formation on the original snowy island and had everyone settle down there for the time being. Those who needed to cultivate cultivated and those who needed to refine pills concocted pills. Right now, Xiao Mu could only make herself slightly busier in order to not let her imagination run wild. Huang He and the others also didn't dare to ask. Ever since they sent off the Long siblings that day, Jojo became increasingly taciturn. She usually kept herself as busy as a small spinning top. If she wasn't guiding them in pill refinement, she was helping Rong Qing in speeding up their training. The cultivators complained incessantly in their hearts, but they didn't dare to reveal anything on the surface. They had all deeply experienced the little stoic's methods. Try it if you dare to complain. I guarantee you'll suffer 100 times more than others. The next day this stoic face was just this swindling. What could you do to her? 3 days later, Arbor strolled back and forth on the surface of the River of Forgetfulness by herself. During this period, she had developed a habit of waiting on the surface for Jojo's lotus to return. She habitually crouched here and stared blankly at the boundless water. She had carved out a large fissure here, and an extremely deep trench appeared. The water on both sides flowed into this deep trench and flowed endlessly. The surface of the sea was still so calm without any ripples. However, they had to be very careful when they reached this place in the future. If they were swept into this trench by the rapids, it would truly be terrible luck. Arbor stared blankly at the trench again today. She sat cross-legged on a futon, and her figure seemed to grow beside the trench, firmly fixed there. She didn't slide down with the rapids, nor did she float out with the currents. She just sat there like this, staring blankly at the deep trench. She didn't know how long she had been in this state. Little Taisui had also come out to persuade her, but he couldn't persuade this little fellow. When Mo Lien fell into the abyss of the sacrificial sea, Jojo's heart also fell in with her. Jojo, how about we go to the Pond Lotus Sacred Realm to take a look? Little Taisui came out again and stood next to the little stoic worriedly, his eyes fixed on her. Arbor looked up at the little Taisui. Do you think Long Shangyun's words are reliable? At that time, I feel that she has no reason to lie to you. You didn't lie to me, but if you want to go to the Pond Lotus Sacred Land, it won't be something that can be solved in a day or two. Jojo still has to wait for Lotus here. Arbor hesitated for a moment and said. Little Tai Sui secretly heaved a sigh of relief. As long as Jojo was willing to go to the Pool Lotus Sacred Realm, everything was fine. Although he didn't know if Lotus Soul existed in this Pond Lotus Sacred Realm, after all Xiao Xiao going out for a walk and strolling around the Mystic Realm was much better than squatting here like a rock waiting for her husband. Arbor glanced at him. Little Tai Sui, will something happen to Jojo's lotus? Of course not. Little Tai Sui pursed his lips and said, haven't you heard of an old saying? What? A scourge lives for 1,000 years. Arbor, Little Tai Sui harumphed and said, what can happen to him? Didn't you already know? The result of the Hidden Night Pavilion's message is that his bright lamp projection is completely unharmed, which means that he's perfectly fine. He's only fine for the time being, Arbor thought worriedly. Jojo, Little Tai Sui said seriously, I think we should go. Chapter 4763. If we don't go to the Pond Lotus Sacred Realm to take a look, how will we know whether that soul belongs to Lotus or not? If we really miss Lotus's soul, then won't we regret it immensely in the future? Arbor thought so as well, so she nodded at Little Tai Sui. Then how about you bring some people to look for it? Little Tai Sui's face was taut as he shook his head and said, that won't do. You need to personally make a trip there. After all, who knows if that guy's soul will be so perverted that he won't even recognize his own family. Arbor, if it really is his soul, even if it's just a trace of his soul brand, he definitely won't attack you. If he attacks you, then it means it's not him. It won't be too late for us to destroy him then. Arbor blinked, feeling that Little Tai Sui's words actually made some sense. However, she still couldn't resist asking, why do we have to destroy him if it's not Lotus's soul? Little Tai Sui humphed. Don't you feel uncomfortable looking at him? Why does he look like Emolien and not him? Arbor was actually a bit speechless. Just how much did Little Tai Sui care about Jojo's lotus? He couldn't even look like Lotus, alright. Little Tai Sui moved his small arms and legs and bounced in front of her. Go make preparations. We'll set off immediately later, okay? Right now, he had to persuade the little stoic first. He couldn't let her stay in this place and be a lookout for her husband. Arbor glanced down at Little Tai Sui and suddenly reached out to pinch his small face. Tai Sui, thank you. She knew this guy just wanted to persuade her to leave this place and go somewhere else to relax. She also knew that her little companions in the star domain were all very worried about her. I've made you guys worry. Little Tai Sui humphed and hastily swatted away her paw with his small hand. He grumbled, impudent, always wanting to get physical with this old man. Arbor couldn't help but laugh and tugged at his long hair. Why are you acting so old when you're still a child? His mood inexplicably improved somewhat. Thinking about it, the little Tai Sui was right. Since the news from the Hidden Night Pavilion said that Jojo's lotus soul was fine, then it should be fine. Taking 10,000 steps back, Mo Lien and He Chen were together, so at least they had a companion. If they encountered any problems, they would probably be able to discuss it. Although the little guy kept comforting himself, there was still a lingering shadow in his heart. She thought of that matured berserk sacred beast. That was really an unstable factor. Little Tai Sui snuck a glance at him, pursed its lips, and said with a solemn expression, all right, don't think too much about it. Anyway, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. His voice paused, and his expression abruptly changed. This time, he couldn't care less about pretending to be an elder lecturing her with sincere and heartfelt words. He hastily grabbed Xiao Mu's fair wrist and ordered sternly, quickly return to the star. Before he could finish saying the word domain, the river of forgetfulness shook violently. Arbor suddenly felt her body sink, and she reflexively reached out to grab the little Tai Sui's lapel. However, he only managed to grab the boy's green and white belt, which was embroidered with emerald green bamboo, before he was sent flying by a huge shock wave uncontrollably. Arbor didn't even have time to open her star domain before she fainted. On the calm surface of the River of Forgetfulness, a series of explosions could be heard. The entire sea was filled with thunderous sounds. At this time, the River of Forgetfulness was being bombarded by divine stone cannons. Chapter 47-64. An hour ago, when Madame Long received the news that her son and daughter had moved to the cold valley of forgetfulness, she almost collapsed. Why do we have to go to the cold valley of forgetfulness? This is an order from our ancestor. Long Chuyu's expression was also very bad. He had already received news that Long Huan did not listen to him and become friends with Jojo. Instead, he followed his grandmother and did a series of foolish things. Ancestor Xuanji has already passed away for so many years. Why does she still want to interfere with the clan's matters? What Madame Long wanted to say was, what right does Ancestor Xuanji have to send the entire Wanchuan dragon clan to the cold valley of forgetfulness? Because this is an order from our ancestor. Long Chuyu coughed heavily and stared at her sternly. Everyone has to accept it. Madame Long's eyes were red and her voice was extremely mournful. Don't you know what kind of place the cold valley of forgetfulness is? How can anyone live in such a place? How long will it take for us to move there? 100 years. Long Chuyu said indifferently. What? Madame Long's eyes were wide open. Why? Before Long Chuyu could get angry, he heard a loud sound and the entire sea defense barrier above them seemed to ripple slightly under the impact. Through the transparent barrier, Long Chuyu and Madame Long could see countless panicked little fish, wagging their tails and running around in all directions. Deafening explosions continued to ring out. Long Chuyu hurriedly called someone over and asked, "What happened?" "Someone's attacking us. The other clans have sent a distress signal." Long Chuyu's expression was grave. "Who did it?" "We don't know yet. We only see countless god stone cannons bombarding our barrier." Madame Long cried out in panic. "What? How long can the barrier last?" This was no joke. The reason why they were able to live at the bottom of the forgetfulness and even be isolated was because of the barrier. Once the barrier was broken, the seawater outside would definitely pour in. At that time, the entire Forgetfulness clan's land would collapse and the losses would be disastrous. They had just been sent to the cold valley of forgetfulness and were attacked repeatedly. Long Chuyu didn't believe that there was no premeditated plan. But who was it that was able to gather so many divine stone cannons? Long Chuyu took a deep breath and quickly walked outside. "Let's go and take a look." "Arbor, it must be Arbor." Madame Long angrily shouted, "The matriarch just left," and she immediately brought people to attack Wang Chuan. This little girl is really ruthless. "Shut up." Long Chuyu glared at her in annoyance. "You usually look like a smart person, but why can't you always be smart at critical moments? How could it be Jojo? She already knows that Ancestor Xuanji of the Dragon Clan banished us all to the forgetful river Cold Valley. Given her character, she would have refuted Ancestor Xuanji's decision on the spot if she did not agree with him. Since she didn't say anything, it means that she has tacitly agreed to our ancestor's decision," Long Chuyu said with a cold voice. "Isn't that perfect?" Madame Long's face was full of hatred. "If we all leave and are banished to the cold valley of forgetfulness, she can take over the magpie's nest and call herself the Great King." "Ha, who's taking over the magpie's nest?" A cold voice slowly entered Madame Long's ears. Chapter 47-65. Long Chuyu and Madame Long were both startled when they saw the handsome young man strolling over with a face as cold as water. Madame Long's expression changed slightly, and she finally couldn't help but say angrily, "It's you. So it was you who brought people with the divine stone cannon to bombard our Wangchuan clan's land?" She turned her head and roared at Long Chuyu, "Look at the good son you taught. This little bastard is getting bolder and bolder. Long Chuyu clutched his chest and coughed heavily a few times. His expression was somewhat incredulous as he looked at the young man in front of him with a complicated gaze. Yun, why did you do this? A trace of alienation and indifference flashed through Ding Yun's eyes, revealing a strange light. Do I need any special reason to do this? Yun, you hate me, don't you? Long Chuyu looked at his son with a pained expression, and there seemed to be a flickering light in his eyes. Young Master Ding was too lazy to look at him, and said coldly, you think too highly of yourself. I've never met you since we were young, and only recently did you know of my existence. Do you think I can hate a stranger? Long Chuyu closed his eyes in pain, and said with certainty, you just hate me. Whatever you say. Ding Yun waved his hand impatiently, men, tie him up. Then, a few disciples of the demonic sect dressed in strange clothes came forward and attacked without any explanation. Madame Long wanted to resist, but she was not Ding Yun's opponent at all. In less than a second, she was bound by the layers of wood spirits that young Master Ding had wrapped around her. Circles of wood vines tied her body like a fried dough twist, tightly wrapping her inside. Madame Long even found it difficult to breathe normally, and her face immediately turned red. Long Chuyu hurriedly said, Yun, don't do this to your mother, shut up. Ding Yun unhappily interrupted Long Chuyu's words, and looked at him coldly, you should take care of yourself first. Good for nothing, sick all over, I don't know what my mother saw in you back then. Long Chuyu looked at his son with a pale face, and opened his mouth, but he was speechless. Long Yun, you disgraceful little bastard. Long Yun. Young Master Ding muttered these two words playfully. He turned his head to look at Madame Long, who was wrapped in wooden vines. A solid wood spirit whip hit the woman's body. Ah! Mrs. Long screamed in pain. Her eyes widened in shock as she stared at young Master Ding in disbelief. It was as if she hadn't expected Ding Yun to be so bold as to openly lay a vicious hand on her, his official mother. You disobedient and unfilial little bastard, how dare you! Mrs. Long's exasperated screams came to an abrupt end under another lash of the whip. Young Master Ding looked coldly at the woman in front of him. Suddenly, he smiled like a spring breeze. Madam, do you think that no one will ever find out about the vicious, heartless, and inhumane things you have done? Madame Long's eyes narrowed slightly as she subconsciously turned to look at Ding Yun. Long Yun, what are you talking about? Madam, it's better to call me Ding Yun. The man had a vicious smile on his face as he looked coldly at Madame Long. Did you think that one day, you would fall into my hands? It's not that the heavens don't punish you. Chapter 47-66. Previously, it was just not the right time. Ding Yun stared coldly at Mrs. Long, and now, it's clearly the right time. A rare trace of panic flashed across Mrs. Long's face. Her gaze followed Ding Yun's raised arm back and forth. She opened her mouth, but seeing that the whip was about to land again, she hurriedly screamed, Long Yun, let's talk things out. Slap. The wood spirit whip in Ding Yun's hand unceremoniously whipped the woman's white cheek. Ah! Madame Long was shocked and angry. She covered her face with her hands in fear. If Mrs. Long's memory is bad, I don't mind reminding you again. Ding Yun looked at her coldly. Madam, it's better to call me Ding Yun. I'm not used to hearing others call me by an unfamiliar name. Mrs. Long's face was distorted. Her eyes were filled with venom as she stared at Ding Yun. Ding Yun. Ding Yun smiled and nodded. Madam, if you have anything to ask, just ask. Madame Long gritted her teeth and clenched her teeth, not making a sound. Since Madam has nothing to say, then let me say it. Long Chuyu was finally able to see some clues. Her son seemed to have come here to settle accounts with Madame Long. But what he didn't understand was that his son had followed Ding Xian since young and never knew his wife. Where did this inexplicable hatred come from? Could it be that Ding Xian often mentioned them in front of his son? Long Chuyu couldn't figure it out. Ding Yun couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense with Mrs. Long. He went straight to the point. Watching your son and daughter go to a barren place like the forgotten river Cold Valley and not be able to leave the valley for 100 years, isn't this heartbreaking? What are you trying to say? Mrs. Long glared at the man in front of her and shouted, Ding Yun, don't try to get information from me. It's useless. Self-righteous. Young Master Ding smiled coldly at her. What do I need to get information from a dying person like you? If I want to know something, wouldn't it be faster to search your soul? Madame Long trembled and looked up at young Master Ding in shock. The latter smiled at her gently and said, Don't worry, I won't kill you for the time being. There are some things that I want to clarify with you. You're the only one who knows about this. As for whether he would take her life after asking her, that would depend on his mood. Madame Long sneered, Do I have to answer just because you asked? As soon as she finished speaking, she felt a hand with fingers as hard as steel tightly gripping her throat. Ding Yun looked at her with a smile, his eyes filled with ruthless coldness. If you don't tell me, you won't even have the chance to see your children one last time. What do you mean? Do you still not understand, madam? Ding Yun looked at her with a cold expression and said, Do you think that I only brought people to encircle and annihilate the remaining old, weak, women, and children of your Wangchuan clan? Long Chuyu's eyes narrowed as he suddenly shouted angrily, Yun, you even sent people to deal with Ji, and Shang Yun? Father is still the smart one. Ding Yun smiled and nodded. You understood immediately. You. Madame Long sucked in a breath of cold air and screamed with great difficulty, You demon, you, ah. Chapter 47-67. Her throat tightened, causing her to be unable to spit out a single word. Ding Yun coldly looked at the woman in front of him and sneered, Before saying that I'm cruel, Madame Long, shouldn't you properly reflect on yourself? You know best what you've done in the past. Yun, At the side, Long Chuyu was weeping with tears and snot, Yun, your younger brother and sister are innocent. Innocent? Who isn't innocent? If I'm not innocent, then isn't my mother innocent? Ding Yun suddenly turned his head and roared at Long Chuyu with a cold expression. If you weren't too timing, would you have caused my mother's tragedy? If it wasn't for you, would my mother have been so crazy as to kill my foster father back then? And then even made me duel with my brother. Ding Yun heavily kicked Madame Long in front of him, his hand fiercely clutching her neck. If you think that Long Huan and Long Shangyun are innocent, then what about me? Am I not innocent? Who did I offend? I was locked in a small dark room by my own mother, had to duel with my own brother, and even killed him with my own hands. Long Chuyu looked at his son in shock, his face filled with disbelief. You said what did you say? At this moment, Ding Yun had already sunk into a huge sorrow. It was as if he was seeing that terrifying scene from more than 10 years ago. At that time, when he pushed open the door of that gloomy and terrifying woodshed, a child pounced on him, kicking and tearing at him. He had no choice. If he didn't kill, others would kill him. At that time, he was only 10 years old. Did he want to die? What could he do if he didn't want to die? His mother left behind a ruthless sentence, saying that there could only be one person who walked out of that dark room alive. Long Chuyu suddenly slumped to the ground and wailed loudly, This isn't real, this isn't real. Cry, you only know how to cry. Other than crying, what else can you do? Ding Yun's face was filled with anger as he angrily said to Long Chuyu. If you weren't indecisive and too timing back then, harming others and yourself, how could mother have become like this? Mother's mental illness is getting worse and worse. Otherwise, why would she be crazy enough to lock us two brothers in the same room and force us to fight to the death? No, you're not telling the truth, no. Of course, What Yun Per said can't be entirely true. A voice full of vicissitudes of life suddenly sounded from outside. Long Chuyu's expression froze, unexpectedly turning his head to look. He saw a woman who looked to be in her 50s. Her cheekbones were thin, and her cheeks were full of wrinkles. She was leaning on a walking stick carved out of ebony wood and slowly walked over. Mrs. Long was wrapped in a pile of vines. She stared at the old woman who walked in with a hint of anger in her eyes. Ding Xian, look at your good son. However, Ding Xian didn't say anything to Madame Long. She didn't even bat an eyelid at her. In the blink of an eye, she looked towards Long Chuyu and said coldly, although what Yun said is not entirely true, a part of it is. Long Chuyu trembled, almost not daring to look directly into Ding Xian's eyes. He didn't expect that after not seeing her for more than 20 years, when they met again, it would be in such a scene. She was simply so old that he didn't dare to recognize her. Long Chuyu's heart trembled slightly. If they were to walk on the street like this, the two of them would pass each other face to face. Long Chuyu definitely wouldn't recognize that this was Ding Xian herself. Chapter 47-68. She had changed too much. Could a person change so much in 20 years? Long Chuyu's heart was filled with emotions as he sat on the ground in a daze, looking up at that woman. Back in the day, she was also a beautiful young lady, as beautiful as a flower. How could she have changed so much? Yun Per. Ding Xian looked at Ding Yun and said indifferently, even now, you still suspect that the first person mother let you kill when you were 10 years old was your twin brother? Ding Yun looked at his mother with a complicated gaze, unable to speak for a long time. Ding Xian said, I was indeed pregnant with twins at that time. However, your younger brother died when he was born. The one you killed when you were 10 years old was actually just a shadow guard. Ding Yun was stunned, but he still looked at Ding Xian in disbelief. Ding Xian continued, do you still remember that child's appearance? He didn't look like you at all, did he? No matter how ruthless mother is, it's impossible for me to let you kill your own brother. Then what about foster father? Why do you believe those specious rumors? Ding Xian said coldly, your foster father was indeed killed by me, but at that time, he was plotting to seize our Beijing manor. How could I let him succeed? The marriage alliance between Carefree Valley and Beijing Manor, your foster father was eyeing Beijing Manor's sphere of influence. How sincere do you think he was to you? He just gave you some small favors. Ding Xian looked at her son indifferently. Don't be confused by a little bit of so-called warmth. Yes, back then, he accompanied you to practice martial arts, and you had a deep relationship with him. But so what? Ding Xian's voice was very cold. He just valued your identity. Mother, is what you said today true? When has mother ever lied to you? Ding Xian looked at Ding Yun, then shook her head and turned to Long Chuyu. She finally looked him in the eye. Their gazes met, and for a moment, all sorts of feelings welled up in their hearts. 50520. She had changed too much. Could a person change so much in 20 years? Long Chuyu's heart was filled with emotions as he sat on the ground in a daze, looking up at that woman. Back in the day, she was also a beautiful young lady, as beautiful as a flower. How could there be such a huge change? Yun Per. Ding Xian looked at Ding Yun and said indifferently, even now, you still suspect that the first person mother let you kill when you were 10 years old was your twin brother? Ding Yun looked at his mother with a complicated gaze, unable to speak for a long time. However, Ding Xian said, I was indeed pregnant with twins at that time. However, your younger brother died at birth. The one you killed when you were 10 was just a secret guard. Ding Yun was stunned, but his gaze still looked at Ding Xian in disbelief. Ding Xian continued, do you still remember the child's appearance? He doesn't look like you at all, does he? No matter how ruthless I am, I can't let you kill your own brother. What about adoptive father? Why do you believe those specious rumors? Ding Xian coldly replied, I was indeed the one who killed your foster father. But he was plotting to seize my Beijing manor, so how could I possibly let him succeed? Carefree Valley and Beijing Manor are connected by marriage. Your foster father is eyeing the sphere of influence of Beijing Manor. How sincere do you think he is to you? It's just some small favors that he usually gives you. Ding Xian glanced at her son indifferently. Don't be confused by a little bit of so-called warmth. Yes, back then, he accompanied you to practice martial arts, so you have a deep relationship with him. But so what? Ding Xian's voice was extremely cold. He only values your identity. Mother, is what you said today true? When has mother ever lied to you? Ding Xian glanced at Ding Yun, then shook her head and turned to Long Chuyu. She finally looked him in the eye. Their gazes met, and for a moment, all sorts of feelings welled up in their hearts. Chapter 47-69. Even if Madame was jealous, it was impossible for her to do such a thing. How could she poison Xian and even harm Yun-her? Long Chuyu subconsciously shook his head. When his gaze met Ding Xian's, his entire body couldn't help but turn cold. Ding Xian was actually looking at him with such a hateful gaze. Long Chuyu hurriedly turned to look at Ding Yun, as if he wanted to verify something. He looked at his son with pleading eyes. Yun-er, tell father, is what your mother said true? What love-severing poison, was it really passed to Yun, through his mother's womb? Ding Yun's gaze coldly swept across his face, so what if I tell you, can you avenge me? Long Chuyu immediately looked like he had suffered a great blow, then turned to look at Madame Long who was locked in the vines. Madam, why did you do this? You're asking me why I did this? Madame Long shrieked, if I didn't do this, would that bitch Ding Xian have left so willingly? You almost abandoned me for a woman from a lower star field. What else can't I do? Long Chuyu looked at her with a face full of shock. Ding Yun saw this and only felt that it was extremely funny. He felt that his father was really funny. He was clearly the one who had a foot in both boats, wavering left and right to harm others, yet he revealed an expression of, I'm also a victim. It was really comical and laughable. Ding Yun shook his head, too lazy to say anything more to him. He turned and walked to Madame Long's side, then heard Long Chuyu call him mournfully from behind. Yun-er. Yun-er. Long Chuyu asked with a face full of pain, does the love-severing poison affect you? Ding Yun felt that his father was becoming more and more laughable. He turned and gave him a charitable glance, what do you think? That's the one and only love-severing poison in the world, do you think it will affect me? I've had poison in my body since I was young. When I was young, the poison would flare up on the 1st and 15th of every month. In order to survive, I had no choice but to fuse with the fire Qilin Fanged snake's poison. It was extremely dangerous, who could I tell? You think I wanted to fuse with this snake's poison and become a detestable demonic cultivator? I'm doing this to survive. Ding Yun looked at him coldly. Yun-er. Long Chuyu cried out sorrowfully, father did not know about this, father, now that you know who the culprit is, will you stand up for me? Can you solve this problem for me? Can you make your wife hand over the antidote to the love-severing poison? Long Chuyu was left speechless by his series of questions. Ding Yun looked at him indifferently as a sneer appeared on his lips. You can't do anything. Brother. Sikong Fuling walked briskly to her side. The people in the front and rear courtyards have all been arrested and there are still more than 200 people left. They are all old, weak, women, and children. I know. Ding Yun nodded. They only received the housewarming notice today. I'm afraid they won't even have time to cry before we take them all down. The remaining old, weak, women and children in the clan would also have to move to the cold valley of the River of Forgetfulness. But to them, the cold valley of the River of Forgetfulness was no different from hell on earth. They might not be able to return alive after going there. Sikong Fuling looked at Madame Long with disdain. Did this woman confess? Did she say how to cure the poison? Chapter 4770. Brother, do you want me to use some special methods to let her enjoy herself? Sikong Fuling took out a flute and smiled sweetly in Madame Long's direction. However, even though her smile was beautiful, it made Madame Long's hair stand on end. She was horrified. Ding Yun reached out and patted her shoulder. Then I'll leave it to you, Fuling. All right. Sikong Fuling grinned and placed the flute in front of her. Just as she was about to blow the nightmare demonic flute, she heard Long Chuyu's pitiful cries behind her. Yun, can you let Ji, and Shang Yun go? The two of them never had anything to do with you. Sikong Fuling smirked and interrupted Long Chuyu's begging with the sound of the flute. On the other side, Long Shangyun and Long Huan's group, who were heading toward the Forgetful River's cold valley, were surrounded by the demon sect's followers. The two parties began an intense battle on the sea. More than half of Long Huan's 3,000 personal guards had been exhausted in the previous battle. Now that they were surrounded by the demon sect's fresh troops, they were naturally defeated. Long Shangyun's lips were slightly pale. She held the bottle of soul-calming pills that Arbor had given her tightly. Her eyes were filled with anxiety as she kept glancing at Long Huan, who was fighting with the others. Long Huan was being surrounded by 3 Mystique Venerable rank experts and was barely able to defend himself. If not for the people from Alhai protecting him with their lives, he would have been captured long ago. Long Shangyun could tell that this group of people was very ruthless. Every strike was fatal to her brother. They did not seem to be out to capture people. They seemed to be out to kill. Long Shangyun's eyes narrowed slightly as she watched one of the men in black slash Long Huan's arm with his saber. Brother! The instant Long Shangyun cried out in surprise, 2 or 3 impolite gazes swept towards her face. Seeing those people rushing towards her, Long Shangyun started to panic. Who could she beat in her current state? She would still be captured easily. She could not implicate her brother. With that thought, Long Shangyun immediately got up with difficulty and jumped into the sea, sinking into the water with a splash. Long Huan looked back and hurriedly called out, Jiang Song, quickly go and take a look. The dragon guard named Jiang Song immediately jumped down with Long Shangyun. At the same time, the entire ship rumbled. A few Mystique Venerable rank cultivators threw divine power orbs onto the ship with cold expressions. Soon, the entire ship was set ablaze. Long Shangyun had just popped her head out when she was blasted out by the shockwaves from the ship. The last thing she saw was Ao Hai pouncing on her brother and blocking a knife for him. However, in the end, the cold blade still pierced through the elder brother's chest. Brother! Long Shangyun's head was hit by the fragments of the ship, and she sank into the water. By the time Ding Yun left Ding Xian, Long Chuyu, and the others behind and walked out of the house, the sun had already set in the west. The sunset glow faintly shrouded the horizon, revealing a somewhat dense color. Look at what you've done. A cold rebuke came from outside the door. Ding Yun looked up and his gaze landed on a man wearing a silver ghost mask who was rushing over. Ding Yun smiled nonchalantly. Since the hall master is here, let's talk in the side room. Sect Master Ding, you're being very unkind. Chapter 4771. The red-clothed man leaned to the side and abruptly interjected, you took action in advance but didn't say anything. How do you expect us to continue cooperating with you? Cult Master Ding smiled faintly. Young Master is joking. This is a personal grudge between me and the Dragon Clan, so there's no need for everyone to intervene. The Ghostface Hall Master glared at him coldly. Cult Master Ding, you don't need me to trouble myself to remind you, right? We're in a cooperative relationship. Please inform us before you take action. Okay. Ding Yun readily nodded in agreement. Everyone, just treat this as an accident that I didn't consider carefully before taking action. I'll definitely inform everyone in a timely manner in the future. What do you plan to do now? Fan Meng and Fan Yu, who followed the Ghostface Hall Master here, couldn't help but frown. I'll resolve some old grudges between me and the Dragon Clan, Ding Yun said with a smile. Everyone should be aware of my relationship with the Dragon Clan of Wangchuan. Gong Songfeng gazed deeply at Ding Yun, a faintly discernible coldness creeping onto his lips. This humble one truly admires Cult Master Ding's meticulous planning. Ding Yun raised his brows noncommittally. Gong Songfeng was about to speak with a fake smile when he saw several demonic cult disciples rush in. When they saw them present, they were clearly taken aback and hesitated on whether they should go forward to report. Is there something that you can't say? Fan Meng said coldly, Cult Master Ding, you sent people to secretly search for something on the surface of the sea. Are you still trying to hide it from us? Ding Yun smiled. Vice Hall Master Meng worries too much. You secretly prepared over 1,000 divine stone cannons to attack the Dragon Clan of Wangchuan. Attacking at the same time, you must have affected Jojo on the surface of the sea, right? Ding Yun was silent for a moment before saying teasingly, Ayaya, I was wondering why you came in such a hurry. So you came for that stoic face. If it's because of this, you can rest assured. The little stoic has been a little fellow with good karma from beginning to end. Nothing can happen to her except for anyone else. Gong Songfeng sneered. You're truly ruthless. Ding Yun raised his eyebrows. No one would have thought that you were the one who had been watching the situation from the sidelines. Fan Meng looked at Cult Master Ding in front of her with an indifferent expression. You deceived them so miserably. Fan Meng's lips curled into a sinister smile, that Dragon Clan leader actually believed your nonsense. He thought that as the Dragon Clan's leader, he really had the ability to release that human-shaped sacred beast. Young Master Ding looked at Fan Meng with interest and suddenly laughed loudly. It's her own stupidity, all right. I'm just looking for two people to intentionally or unintentionally mention the legendary humanoid sacred beast in the sacrificial sea abyss to her. It's that old woman's selfishness and greed that's causing trouble. If it wasn't for that, how could she possibly be used by me? Ding Yun sneered. After all, this is our last chance, isn't it? What's more, your heavenly fate also played an indelible role in this. Ding Yun said with a chuckle, after all, I didn't refine the medicinal liquid that made the humanoid sacred beast go berserk. It was provided by your organization. Speaking of which, the heavenly fate truly had many talents. It was truly surprising that they could refine a medicinal liquid that could make a sacred beast go berserk. Chapter 4772. If it weren't for your esteemed organization's top-notch frenzy-inducing medicinal liquid, I wouldn't have been able to do it. That bottle of catalytic medicine in the old hag's hands wouldn't have been able to accomplish anything, all right? What a joke. That old hag actually thought that her group of useless clansmen could really refine the ingredients needed to make the frenzy-inducing medicinal liquid from the holy beast Black Dragon. Ding Yun couldn't help but snicker. What a joke. The reason why the frenzy-inducing medicinal liquid in her hands could successfully make that snake-bodied and human-shaped holy beast go berserk was because he secretly replaced the original bottles of useless medicinal liquid for her. The reason why the frenzy-inducing medicinal liquid Long Qian threw out was due to the contributions of that group of genius alchemists from All Seer. Fan Meng looked at young Sir Ding coldly. You're really quite ruthless. Back then, you secretly summoned that human-shaped holy beast in the dark in front of the little stoic. Weren't you worried that the holy beast would tear her apart? What do I have to worry about? Darkness flashed through young Sir Ding's eyes. Wouldn't someone risk their life to protect her? Not only Fan Meng, but Gong Songfeng's eyes also involuntarily narrowed. So, this guy was certain that Mo Lien would risk her life to save the little stoic? His true target was actually that crown prince of the divine province. Everyone looked at this cult master Ding, whose mind was full of twists and turns, in astonishment. Gong Songfeng was even more vigilant. He actually felt like he was asking a tiger for its skin when cooperating with this great cult master who was so adept at scheming. Ding Yun smiled faintly. "See, I've told you everything. Then can you tell me where the little stoic went?" He practically didn't need to summon those demonic cult disciples who hurried over for questioning to know that they definitely couldn't find the little fellow in the sea of forgetfulness. Could it be that this facial paralysis hid in his portable godly domain at the critical moment? This wasn't impossible, Ding Yun speculated inwardly. Fan Yu shook her head. "We searched the surface of the sea but couldn't find any trace of her. It seems that she was thrown very far away because of that tremor." Fan Yu paused. "Or perhaps, she returned to her portable divine realm." Ding Yun smiled faintly. "I'm guessing that she probably went into hiding. This little guy was as cunning as a fox, slippery and hard to catch. Send people to search everywhere." Cult Master Ding sighed. No one knew where he had run off to. When Arbor regained consciousness, it was probably night time. Because when he opened his eyes, everything before him was pitch black. He hurriedly flipped over and sat up, vigilantly trying to pull out a ferrule from his conscience. However, as soon as he used his divine sense, he felt an incessant pain in his head, and he immediately became vigilant. When the little stoic recalled Master reminding her that she couldn't use her divine conscience for a while, she couldn't help but crease her brows. After groping around in her sleeves, the little stoic expressionlessly took out a bottle of soul-calming pills, poured out a pill, and tossed it into her mouth to chew. His eyes suddenly lit up. This pill was actually tangerine-flavored. It was strangely delicious. The door opened slightly, and she sensed someone approaching in the darkness. The little stoic groped around the low cabinet next to her pillow, casually picked up a bowl, and threw it at the newcomer. "Who's sneaking around?" That person clearly didn't expect the stoic to be awake and was caught off guard, almost getting hit in the head by the medicine bowl. However, she heard a crisp pop in the darkness, and a candle flame was lit. The little stoic was involuntarily startled when she saw the newcomer. "It's you." Chapter 4773. Fifth young Master Qin glanced down. He saw that the bowl of porridge he was holding had now shattered into several pieces and pitifully fell to the ground. There was simply no way to salvage the situation. He couldn't resist lifting his head and glaring at Arbor in a huff. "Why are you so violent, destroying and attacking people at the drop of a hat?" Arbor glanced at him in surprise before casting a wary glance behind him. "Why are you here? Who's outside?" "Aya, my Chiao, why are you still so unadorably vigilant?" "I'm just passing by." A frivolous voice was heard from outside the door. Arbor knew who the visitor was just by hearing that voice. His small face immediately put on his trademark expressionless face, and he didn't even bat an eyelid as he coldly said to the door, "Get in here." Eldest young Master Qin strode through the door, his handsome face beaming with amusement. "Long time no see, my Chiao." The little stoic's hand was as quick as lightning, and she threw a handful of small nails at him without a second word. Eldest young Master Qin's handsome face that was like a spring breeze contorted slightly. He placed one hand on the door frame and forcefully flipped his body outside. A row of black nails as thick as a pinky finger was nailed into the door in a very consistent manner. A woman's shriek was subsequently heard, accompanied by hurried footsteps. The group of subordinates frantically called out, "Young master, young master." They scrambled to unsheath their swords from their waists, looking ready for battle. When did an assassin sneak onto the ship and attack their eldest young master viciously without a second word? Eldest young Master Qin twitched his mouth and waved his hand helplessly. "It's fine, it's fine. There's no assassin, there's nothing at all. Withdraw." Eldest young Master Qin pacified his nervous personal bodyguards. Withdraw. What do you mean it's fine? Arbor heard a woman's shrill shriek from outside the door. Eldest cousin, I told you not to save that person inside. She's so vicious and doesn't know what's good for her. She doesn't have the slightest bit of gratitude, so what's the point of saving her? When Arbor heard the words, eldest cousin, he couldn't help but roll his eyes at the sky. She had come. After parting on Sikong Star, his cousin Yang Fengyan, whom he hadn't seen for many years, had actually been brought to the 3 continents by the Qin estate. It was indeed easier to get things done when there were people in the residence. With Yang Fengyan's terrible talent and cultivation at that time, even if she died in this lifetime, it would be impossible for her to climb the heavenly stairway to the middle 6 prefectures, let alone wander around the 3 continents. So talent and whatnot could not be generalized. Many people who were hundreds of times more talented than Yang Fengyan could not obtain the qualifications to come to the upper realm just because their family's influence was weak. I already said it's fine. What's the fuss about? The eldest young master's voice was tinged with impatience. Obviously, he was not in the mood to continue arguing with Yang Fengyan and the others. Miss Yang, you don't need to worry too much about our eldest young master. You just need to take care of yourself. A woman's indifferent voice sounded, covering Yang Fengyan's screams. You're just a little concubine by my cousin's side. How dare you talk to me like that? Do you believe that I won't slap you? All right. Eldest young Sir Qin pressed his aching temples. Everyone, return. Yang Fengyan stomped her feet. Eldest cousin. No way, I'm worried about you. I have to stay and watch that little bitch inside to prevent her from making a move on you again. Qin Xian's expression instantly darkened. Chapter 47-74. Yang Fengyan shrunk her neck and instantly realized that she had said the wrong thing. She pursed her lips and bashfully said in a small voice, I was also worried about cousin. Who do you think you can control with your mediocre martial arts skills? Eldest young Sir Qin didn't leave any face for his cousin at all and mocked her without any trace of politeness. With your fancy moves, you won't even be able to withstand a single punch from the little stoic. The eldest young Sir said impatiently, if you don't want to die, then scram further away. Yang Fengyan stomped her feet indignantly. Her cultivation back then, was just a bit higher than mine. Cousin, don't exaggerate, alright? Are you sure she's just a bit higher than you? Eldest young Sir Qin's handsome face frosted over as he glanced irritably at cousin Yang. He scoffed. Alright, don't cause trouble here. Hurry and leave. If it weren't for his father's sake, would he warn this idiot in front of him? Who cared if she died or not? Qin Xian turned around and walked towards the room. He hadn't taken a few steps when he heard fifth brother stutter to the little stoic, how could you kill eldest brother? The little stoic said, I never need a reason to kill. Fifth brother continued to stutter, you're not someone who kills without batting an eyelid. Why would you describe yourself like that? The little stoic said, how would you know what kind of person I am? Fifth brother stopped stuttering and smoothly said, you're just not good at expressing yourself. Actually, you have a pretty good heart. Otherwise, you wouldn't have saved me back then, and you wouldn't have disdained me for being troublesome while taking care of me. You saw what seventh brother did to me and even helped teach him a lesson. I know you're not that kind of bloodthirsty person. Qin Xian's footsteps paused, and he heard the little stoic scoff. That's because you don't understand me too well. Qin Xian, why did he feel like these two people's conversation contained a bit of inexplicable humor? One stuttered while the other was as cold as a brick. Fifth brother, this child, had always disliked interacting with others, and he loathed interacting with women even more. He didn't expect that he would be able to say such a coherent sentence in front of the little stoic. You are an extremely good person, fifth young master Qin said. Arbor, who had been labeled as a good person, silently raised his head and glanced at the fifth young master. He was too lazy to respond to him. What kind of good person was she? Don't think that she would let her guard down just because they gave her the good person card to numb her. People from the Qin estate had appeared in the river of forgetfulness, and had even coincidentally saved her. Things that were too coincidental inexplicably gave off the smell of conspiracy. Jojo, I'm coming in. Eldest young Sir Qin shouted from outside the door, don't throw concealed weapons at me anymore. It was so scary just now. Arbor glanced up and saw eldest young Sir Qin stride in first, followed by young Fengyan and a somewhat familiar-looking woman. When young Fengyan saw Arbor, her eyes blazed with hatred as if she was meeting an enemy. Her pair of beautiful eyes stared fixedly at her, and she bit her lip tightly without uttering a sound. Arbor glanced at them. Are you guys planning to put me under house arrest? Young Fengyan was like a firecracker that ignited at the slightest spark, and she jumped up. Who put you under house arrest? My eldest cousin and the others saved you out of the kindness of their hearts, so why aren't you the least bit grateful? Instead, you're acting so overbearing. Why are you in the sea of forgetfulness? Arbor glared sharply at Qin Xian. Chapter 47-75. Eldest young Sir Qin smiled helplessly. Just as he was about to explain, he heard young Fengyan chirping, Woman, you're so unreasonable. Could it be that your family owns this sea of forgetfulness? If you can come, then we can't come. We, the Qin estate's people, can't go anywhere. Young Fengyan glanced at the little stoic complacently. Let alone the river of forgetfulness, even if it's the holy domain, we can go there if we want. Arbor threw her a severe gaze. You don't know the rules. I'm talking to your eldest young sir, is it your place to interrupt? Slap yourself 10 times. Everyone, young Fengyan's face instantly turned red and green, as if it had been painted green. She was so angry that smoke seemed about to come out of her head. You, don't go too far. Young Fengyan had only spoken halfway when she saw the little stoic raise her hand. A terrifyingly huge force pushed in front of her. Young Fengyan screamed and reflexively wanted to hide behind someone else, but how could the little stoic allow her to escape since she was the one being targeted? A crisp slap landed on her face from a distance. Young Fengyan fell headfirst out of the door in a very sorry state. Her head probably hit the ground, as it made a rather dull thud. Eldest young Sir Qin rolled his eyes helplessly. He already told her to stay outside and not follow in, but she refused to listen and insisted on coming in to challenge the little stoic's bottom line. It was as if she was seeking death, burrowing in to take this slap. What else could he say? She truly forgot the pain after the wound healed. She was simply so stupid that he couldn't bear to look at her directly. She had completely forgotten how she had suffered at the little stoic's hands back then in the Qin estate, right? Perhaps young Fengyan was dazed from the fall, for she didn't make a sound for a long time. Arbor looked up at eldest young Sir Qin and asked suspiciously, Why did you appear here so coincidentally? I've been here for more than half a month. The eldest young sir rolled his eyes irritably and walked to her without consulting anyone. He raised his hand and rudely poked her head. Don't always suspect others. I don't have a trace of malice toward you. What are you doing in the sea of forgetfulness? If it was said to be sightseeing, then it would be too far away. Moreover, in this boundless sea of forgetfulness, there was no reason to stop. Eldest young Master Qin smiled at her. Our estate has received news that the largest pond lotus sacred realm in the river of forgetfulness will open in half a month. Ahem. Eldest young master coughed in embarrassment. I'm definitely not the one who came here to scout. But I saw that I had nothing to do, so, Arbor looked at him with disdain, and the young master looked back at her innocently. You do have a lot of free time. Jojo. Eldest young Sir Qin threw her a coquettish glance with a grin. Tell me, how vigilant are you? No matter how I look at it, none of them look like good people. Arbor was silent for a long time. Suddenly, he said expressionlessly, "Why do you keep winking at me? I can see that your eyes are clear and spirited. You don't seem to have any symptoms of an eye disease. Do you want me to take your pulse?" The 5 young masters were speechless. Eldest young sir huffed, "Aya, Jojo, I'm not playing with you anymore. You really are an unromantic blockhead." Arbor glanced at him expressionlessly. "Then do you want to take my pulse?" "I'll take your pulse." Eldest young Sir Chin couldn't resist rolling his eyes. Chapter 4776. He silently ridiculed the little stoic in his mind. Not only is this stoic slow-witted, but she also can't see people. I wonder what's going on. Take him, for example. Even if the Qin estate's eldest young sir, who was as beautiful as a flower, intentionally loitered in front of Sir Jojo all day long, the little stoic would definitely turn a blind eye to him. Want to eat? Sir Jojo's shout brought eldest young Sir Chin's wandering thoughts back. When he returned to his senses and met Arbor's pitch-black eyes, eldest young Sir involuntarily chuckled. "Okay, I'll instruct people to prepare it right away. You fainted from the divine stone cannon earlier, so you can't eat too much random food. How about I cook you a bowl of plain porridge?" Just as 5th young Sir finished speaking, he saw the little stoic turn around and shake her head at him. She said resolutely, "Want to eat?" 5th young Sir couldn't help but want to laugh when he saw her determined expression. Arbor said expressionlessly, "I want to eat red braised pork." 5th young Sir originally wanted to tell her that this dish was too greasy and that she was more suited to eat bland dishes. In the end, when he saw the little stoic's frozen expression, for some reason, the words that reached his mouth actually turned into "okay. I'll go take a look in the kitchen." 5th young Sir fled in defeat. Arbor was baffled, not understanding what was going on with 5th young Sir Chin. Seeing that 5th young Sir also followed him out, the little stoic then raised her hand to check her pulse. She wanted to check her body's condition. Why was she so weak that she couldn't even touch meat? She also didn't know which quack had prescribed her a prescription while she was unconscious, saying that she was suited to eat bland food. She couldn't help but be taken aback when she checked her pulse. Unwilling to give up, the little stoic then checked her pulse 3 times in a row before finally confirming one thing. Her pulse was smooth and round, like a bead on a plate. This was clearly a pregnancy pulse. Just by looking at her expression, it was absolutely impossible to tell that she was agitated. Who would have expected that her heart was surging abnormally right now? She simply didn't dare to believe her own pulse. The little stoic was still worried and checked her pulse twice. When she lifted her head, there seemed to be a flickering luster flowing in her pair of watery eyes, and he couldn't discern the slightest hint of joy or anger. She, who had lived 2 lives, had become a mother for the first time. What kind of life experience was this? She didn't know, but if someone familiar with her was here, they would be able to tell that her breathing was erratic and her heart was beating rapidly. It should be smooth and sleek, like a pearl moving on a plate. This was clearly the pulse of pregnancy. Just by looking at her expression, it was impossible to tell that she was emotional. Who would have thought that at this moment, her heart was surging with emotions? He couldn't believe his own pulse. The little stoic was still worried and checked her pulse twice. When she lifted her head, there seemed to be a flickering luster flowing in her pair of watery eyes, and he couldn't discern the slightest hint of joy or anger. She, who had lived 2 lives, had become a mother for the first time. What kind of life experience was this? She didn't know, but if someone familiar with her was here, they would be able to tell that her breathing was erratic and her heart was beating rapidly. It should be smooth and sleek, like a pearl moving on a plate. This was clearly the pulse of pregnancy. Just by looking at her expression, it was absolutely impossible to tell that she was agitated. Who would have thought that her heart was surging abnormally right now? He simply didn't dare to believe his own pulse. The little stoic was still worried and checked her pulse twice. When she lifted her head, there seemed to be a flickering luster flowing in her pair of watery eyes, and he couldn't make out the slightest hint of joy or anger. She, who had lived 2 lives, had become a mother for the first time. What kind of life experience was this? She didn't know, but if someone familiar with her was here, they would be able to tell that her breathing was erratic and her heart was beating rapidly. Chapter 47-77. He especially did not want to talk to this fellow beside him. This fellow would occasionally tell him, "My Jojo misses me, my Jojo misses me, my Jojo misses me, what is my Jojo doing now?" So annoying, so long-winded. Only he had Jojo. Tui. How long have we been walking, Peach Blossom? Mo Lien was extremely bored and asked again after walking for a short distance. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal was speechless. Why did he not want to talk to this fellow for some reason? "It's been 2 days, He-chan replied expressionlessly. In the pitch-black darkness, Mo Lien did not notice He-chan's foul expression and continued to say casually, "I wonder where that stinky human snake has run off to." In these 2 days, they could sense a trace of his aura from time to time. As they chased after him, they could always notice that the human snake's aura was faintly discernible and somewhat intermittent. That fellow was also a cunning fellow. Knowing that he was injured, he quickly found a place to escape. How could there be such a good thing? Taking advantage of someone's illness to take their life had always been their style. If they did not get rid of him now, when would they? He-chan kicked something round under his feet. It rolled on the ground covered with gravel and stones, making a gurgling sound. In such a dark and silent atmosphere, it seemed a little frightening. Mo Lien narrowed her eyes and looked over. She spread out her divine perception and caught the object on the ground. It was a human skull. The 2 of them looked at each other in the dark, vigilance rising in their hearts. Could it be that there was still a ferocious beast hiding in the darkness ahead? The further they went, the more grotesquely shaped heads they saw. If they were not careful, they might even step on them. He-chan and Mo Lien looked at each other again, a trace of suspicion slipping through their hearts at the same time. Did that humanoid divine beast have such a big appetite? Other than human skulls, there were also many animal skeletons on the ground. Could it be that the humanoid divine beast had been silent underground for many years and felt especially hungry once it was released, so it ate a sumptuous dinner? Such a ferocious thing must not be allowed to remain in this world. The 2 of them chased for a while before 7th Yen suddenly came out of Mo Lien's sacred beast space and said with a serious expression, "Master, I can feel it." "Where?" "It's not far ahead." As soon as the 7th Yen finished speaking, he took the lead and dashed toward the source of the aura. As they got closer, they saw that the human-shaped snake beast had its back facing them. Its snake tail was slowly slithering on the ground. 7th Yen stopped in his tracks. He turned around and secretly said to his master, "Master, I'll go and ambush him. I'll buy you some time." Mo Lien was stunned. Just as she was about to ask 7th Yen what time he was trying to buy for her, she saw him fly towards the back of the humanoid sacred beast without saying a word. He was so fast that Mo Lien didn't have time to stop him. Mo Lien could not help but tense up when she saw 7th Yen jump onto the back of the humanoid sacred beast. They had all experienced the power of this matured holy beast. 7th Yen, that little rascal, could not possibly be a match for the humanoid sacred beast. Just as Mo Lien and Zhichen's hearts were about to jump up, the humanoid sacred beast also turned around when it heard the sound of wind whistling from behind. However, when he turned around, he met 7th Yan's big eyes and couldn't help but be stunned. 7th Yan's fist was aimed at the back of the humanoid sacred beast. That fellow suddenly turned his head and looked at the 2 of them. "You. What are you doing?" Chapter 47-78. What was surprising was that the moment the holy beast spoke, it cautiously took 2 steps back. That defensive little expression on her face made people feel a little annoyed. They were the ones who should be on guard. What was the meaning of this mature sacred beast's defensive expression? 7th Yan's fist froze in midair. He put it down and glanced at him. You're awake. His words seemed to have touched the sacred beast's reverse scale. He jumped up and shouted, I've always been awake. When have I not been awake? 7th Yan chuckled and said rudely, 2 days ago, when you went crazy in the river of forgetfulness, you were already not awake. That's because someone did something evil to me. The snake man's eyes were red with anger. He muttered, I've guarded the river of forgetfulness for the dragon clan for so many years. In the end, they locked me up in the abyss of the sacrificial sea. When I get there, I'll skin everyone in the Wangchuan dragon clan alive. Oh. Why would the dragon clan lock you up in the abyss of the sacrificial sea? 7th Yan asked curiously. Yuan Shichen replied calmly, isn't that obvious? Of course, it's because he went berserk. The dragon clan had no choice but to lock him up. Otherwise, if such a powerful sacred beast had stayed in the clan, the dragon clan would have been famous in the 3 continents decades ago. The humanoid sacred beast's face turned green and white. He turned and shouted at Yuan Shichen, what the hell do you know? I went berserk because I had no choice. Unlike this time, he had been driven mad by someone with ulterior motives, causing him to lose his mind and become a knife in someone else's hand. Mo Lien said expressionlessly, since you've been in the abyss of the sacrificial sea for so long, you should be very familiar with the surroundings. Where is this place? Is there another path in front? The humanoid sacred beast rolled his eyes at him. I've been sleeping in the abyss of the sacrificial sea for many years. I was woken up a few days ago. What do you think I know? Yuan Shichen and Mo Lien looked at him with disdain. What's the use of having you? He didn't even know how to use it, let alone its other effects. The 2 of them exchanged a few words with him and realized that the holy beast's mind had indeed cleared up. Now, in that pair of faint glazed eyes, other than a hint of alienation and indifference, there was also a trace of confusion. Their gazes fell on his hand, and only then did they realize that this fellow was holding a beast bone in his hand. He actually looked at them with a somewhat comical expression. Ma Shichen immediately pulled Mo Lien's sleeve warily. The latter hurriedly moved closer to him and stared at the holy beast warily. 7th Yan snatched the beast bone from his hand. What are you trying to do? I'm warning you, don't think you can beat us just because you're clear-headed. The humanoid sacred beast was very angry. He raised his hand to snatch the beast bone from 7th Yan's hand. How dare you? How dare you snatch my food? Mo Lien and Hichen held their breaths and waited. They were about to help 7th Yan beat up the human snake when they suddenly heard the creature's cry. For a moment, they thought they were hallucinating. Something didn't feel right. Shouldn't the humanoid sacred beast rush up and fight with 7th Yan in a fit of rage? Why did he say something so strange? An idea occurred to Hichen. He glanced at the beast bone and poked Mo Lien's arm. Don't tell me this fellow wants to roast some meat. Chapter 47-79. While Yan Qi was in a daze, the divine beast snatched the holy beast from Yan Qi's hand. The humanoid sacred beast snatched the bone from Yan Qi's hand and glared at Yan Qi angrily. If you want to eat it, go find it yourself. There are many more over there. Yan Qi, strange. Why did he feel like the mature super holy beast in front of him had walked down from a pedestal? Why did he feel like his image was disillusioned? He was as strong as he was when he wasn't calm before, but now, he was as Chinibu as he was. Hichen hurried forward and asked tentatively, do you want me to roast it for you? The humanoid holy beast's eyes lit up slightly. He pretended to ponder for a while, glanced at Shichen, and nodded his head reluctantly. Since you want to show your filial piety so much, this old man will give you a chance. Shichen, how could he beat this old thing to death? How's your cooking? The humanoid holy beast asked seriously. It's okay, Shichen replied weakly. Jojo also praised my cooking skills before. The humanoid holy beast's eyes lit up. Then, he asked with a straight face, Jojo is that wretched girl holding the ancient holy sword, right? Why is she so hot-tempered? She slashed me with her sword without any explanation. She was crazy. Didn't she know that super holy beasts like him were hard to find in this world? How could there not be more? How could she bear to kill such a precious holy beast? She was a wretched girl who didn't care about her life. Shichen blinked. How should I address you? You juniors can just call me Senior Lan Shan. Mo Lien, this guy was taking advantage of her. Why did she feel so irritated? Sua Lan Shan glanced at Shichen. Seeing that he had borrowed some fire from the kid beside him and was roasting the holy beast bone as if he was roasting it, Sua Lan Shan instantly felt happy. Why are we here? Mo Lien couldn't help but roll her eyes. If not for the fact that she couldn't beat this guy, she really wanted to punch and kick him. You still have the nerve to ask. It's all your fault that we're here. Just now, I spread out my divine sense and looked ahead. I found that this place is vast and deep, and I can't see the end of it. Sua Lan Shan coiled up his snake tail and sat down on the ground. This old man has decided to rest here for a while and eat something before continuing. Mo Lien looked at him expressionlessly. Look again. See if you can sense any signs of life in front. What do you mean? Sua Lan Shan asked in confusion. Yuan Shichen couldn't help but twitch the corner of his mouth. What he meant was for you to spread out your divine sense and take a look. Are there any holy beasts stronger than you nearby? How many saint beasts do you think there are in this world? As Sua Lan Shan spoke, he raised his chin proudly. A saint beast stronger than me has yet to be born. Even 7th Yen, who was standing behind him, could not help but roll his eyes at the snake man. What's wrong with this beast? When he didn't speak and just fought, he felt quite cold. His expression was indifferent and cold, and his moves were quite ruthless. The defense of his copper skin and iron bones was also very shocking. Basically, he was indeed in an invincible state. But even so, who would praise himself so immodestly? There are so many corpses piled up nearby. Something powerful must have passed by here. It could be a human, or a beast. It could be neither human nor beast. Only then did Sua Lan Shan have a look of realization. Chapter 4780. Oh, that's fine too. After this old man is full, this old man will use my divine perception to check if there are any dangers in the surroundings. After a few words, Sua Lan Shan's gaze was completely attracted by the fragrant roasted beast bones in Shichen's hands. There was a large piece of meat wrapped around the beast bones, and it was indeed enough for a normal person to eat. But this was a mature sacred beast, so how could such a small piece of meat be enough to fill the gaps between his teeth? Hence, Shichen roasted 11 pieces of beast bones consecutively for this fellow before he was finally full. After eating his fill, Sua Lan Shan looked very happy. Alright, let this old man take a look. His voice suddenly paused, and his ears twitched. Seems like something is approaching. I wonder if husband has any food to eat. Sir Jojo muttered to himself as he held a piece of red braised pork in his hand. Husband and rotten peach blossom fell into that pit, so I wonder what the situation is now. No matter what, I still have to wait at the entrance of the sacrificial sea's abyss. Perhaps I can wait for Jojo's lotus and rotten peach blossom there. Is the food not to your liking? The 5th young master's gentle voice sounded in her ears. Arbor returned to his senses and expressionlessly glanced at 5th young master Qin. He shook his head and set down his bowl and chopsticks in passing. I'm full. You didn't eat much. It's enough. It was fine as long as there was enough nutrition. From now on, she had to take better care of her body and protect herself and the baby. I wonder what the baby looks like. It wouldn't be good if it looked like her and had a paralyzed face. It was better to look like Lotus. When Jojo's Lotus casually smiled at others, it really looked like a mountain flower in full bloom. No good, that wasn't good either. It was too ostentatious. Jojo's Lotus couldn't casually smile at others. Forget it, there was no need to think so much. The top priority was to leave this place first. Although eldest Qin saved her, she just wasn't willing to have anything to do with the Qin estate's people. Forget it. He saved her, so she had to express her gratitude. After a while, she would go to the storage talisman to take a look. If there were any pills suitable for 5th Qin, she would just gift them to him. On the other end, Xiao Mu's thoughts were hazy, and her thoughts were in a mess. On the other side, 5th young Master Qin called out to her weakly several times, but he didn't receive any response. She couldn't help but look at her curiously. Miss Xiao. Joe. Arbor suddenly came back to his senses and looked at him. Oh, it's nothing. It wasn't very polite for her to completely let her mind wander when other people were talking to her. Xiao Mu nodded at the 5th young master before asking absent-mindedly, have you been feeling better recently? Yes, much better. When eldest young Sir Qin walked in, he heard the 5th young Sir stuttering as he conversed with the little stoic. Jojo, we've gathered first-hand information on Forget Chuan. Do you want to hear it? Arbor raised a brow. Could it be that the huge explosion on the surface of the sea earlier was because something happened to the Forget Chuan Dragon Clan's land? Did someone assemble many divine stone cannons to attack the Forget Chuan clan's land? But didn't Long Huan and Long Shangyun already leave the Forget Chuan clan's land? Why were these people attacking Forget Chuan again? It was the demonic cult's cult master, Ding Yun, who gathered people and launched an all-out attack on the Forget Chuan clan's land. Eldest young Sir Qin smiled at her. It's really lively. Arbor couldn't help but be startled. How's Forget Chuan? Chapter 4781. We received news that the demonic sect's young master Ding not only led people to surround the Wangchuan clan, but also captured Long Chuyu and his wife. In addition, he also sent people to deal with Long Jiang and Long Shangyun. Arbor was taken aback when she heard this. Her fingers tightened slightly as she asked expressionlessly, why did he capture Long Jiang and Long Shangyun? Eldest young master shook his head with a smile. Not capture, kill. Arbor's eyes widened abruptly. After a long pause, she said, what other news did you receive? Spit it all out at once. Who exactly did this fellow learn this habit of speaking half and leaving half unsaid? Eldest young Master Qin couldn't help but be amused when he saw her serious expression. This fellow simply dragged a stool over and sat down beside her. Crossing his long legs, he smiled at her and said, hey, how did you know that I know more than this? Arbor glanced at him expressionlessly, too lazy to talk to him. Was there even a need to think about it? Although eldest Qin, this fellow, had a mischievous and unreliable appearance on the surface, he was still extremely meticulous in his work. Since he sent people to keep an eye on the Wangchuan Dragon Clan, he must be paying attention to every detail, big or small. Okay. I'll tell you everything. Eldest young Master Qin nodded and said with a smile, the news I received is that during the encirclement, Long Jiang perished, and Long Shangyun was smashed into the Sea of Wangchuan by the ship's fragments. She hasn't been found yet. Arbor reflexively clenched 2 fingers. Qin Xian lowered his head to look at her small hands and said with a sigh, Jojo, you still care about them very much. I've already sent people to search for Long Shangyun. Don't worry, as long as she's still breathing, the people I sent to search for her will be able to save her. He knew that this little fellow was a stubborn and soft-hearted little fellow. That was why he had sent people to search for that girl Long Shangyun earlier. However, the Sea of Wangchuan was extremely large. If Long Shangyun transformed into a mermaid and hid in some underwater cave, it wouldn't be easy to find her. Ding Yun's people are also searching for her now. It seems that he wants to see her alive or dead. Eldest young Sir Qin sighed and said, "Your uncle and aunt probably won't have a good ending in his hands." Arbor was silent for a moment before he nodded indifferently. Long Chuyu was Ding Yun's biological father. As his son, he did not feel sorry for his father, so it was even more impossible for her, his nominal niece, to meddle in other people's business. Lord Jojo didn't want to get involved in the trivial matters of the Forgotten River Dragon clan. It was just that Long Shangyun was a little too innocent after all. "Don't worry, Jojo. I've already sent many people to look for her. I'll be able to rescue Miss Long before Ding Yun does," Zither young master said with a smile. Arbor glanced at him and said coldly, "I'm not worried about her." Eldest young Sir Qin stood up with a smile. All right. You're not worried about her. Who can you fool with that look in your eyes?" He was obviously very worried about Long Shangyun, but he liked to pretend that he didn't care. The eldest young master smiled and shook his head. "Jojo, rest well. I'll come and see you later." Arbor really wanted to shout at him, "Don't come and find me if there's nothing." But he heard this Zither young master say with a chuckle, "I'll bring you the latest news of the Forgotten River Dragon clan when the time comes." Hence, Xiaomu didn't say anything. Forgotten River Dragon clan water prison Sikong Fuling put down the demonic flute in her hands and looked smilingly at the girl who was tied to the iron pillar with her head drooping. Chapter 4782. This woman had been hanging from the iron pillar in this position for more than 6 to 10 hours. She had been in this half-dead state the entire time. Sikong Fuling reached out and snapped her fingers. Immediately, the jingling sound of pendants could be heard. Two beautiful women with half of their jade arms exposed and dressed in colorful silk walked in while dragging a wooden barrel. They bowed to Sikong Fuling. "Saintess." Sikong Fuling nodded and looked at the drooping woman with a faint sneer in her eyes. "Madam Long, you're quite stubborn. Come, move the people in." Madam Long abruptly raised her head and stared fixedly at Sikong Fuling with bloodshot eyes, as though she wanted to swallow her whole. Her eyes were filled with a cold fury and venomous light as she stared fixedly at Sikong Fuling and didn't move away for a long while. Sikong Fuling didn't take it to heart as she smiled and waved her small hand. "Hurry up, I have excellent news to tell Madam Long in a while." The two beautiful women walked up with graceful expressions and unlocked the iron chains on Madam Long's body. They pulled her down from the iron pillar and dragged her to the large wooden barrel. As soon as the wooden barrel's lid was opened, a layer of chill rushed over. Madam Long shuddered unexpectedly as she looked up at Sikong Fuling with a look of disbelief. What are you doing?" Madam Long's voice was filled with uncontrollable fear and despair. I want to see Chu Yu, I want to see Ding Yun's father. I think Madam Long still hasn't figured out what your current status is." Sikong Fuling smiled at her. That smile was so cold and terrifying that Madam Long couldn't help but shudder violently. "Do you understand that you're a prisoner now? A prisoner of my demonic sect." Sikong Fuling smiled coldly at her. "You don't have the right to ask for this and that, Madam Long." Madam Long shuddered all over. Don't be fooled by the two maidservants who were holding her up because they were very strong. It didn't take much effort for them to drag her to the wooden barrel. Mrs. Long shook her head again and again. Her cultivation was low to begin with, and now that Ding Yun had sealed the last bit of spirit energy in her body, she was like an ordinary person who was at the mercy of others. She couldn't resist at all. The two maids dragged Madame Long and roughly lifted her up, throwing her into the bucket. Two pairs of hands pressed down on her shoulders, forcing her to sink deeper into the bucket. Her legs sank into a pile of bone-chilling ice. "How does it feel, Madame Long?" Sikong Fuling smiled faintly at her. "Let you stay in this bone-piercing ice spirit for 2 hours. "Oh, no, it will only take about 1 incense stick's worth of time." "Take a guess, will your legs still be able to walk?" Madame Long's pupils constricted as she screamed, "I want to see Ding Yun. Let me go. You dare to treat me like this? I want to see Ding Yun, I want to see Ding Yun." Sikong Fuling smiled at her and picked up a fist-sized ice spirit. She crushed it into powder and threw it at Madame Long's face. Madame Long instantly shuddered as that iciness drilled into her neck. "Madame Long, your son, Long Jing, is dead." Madame Long widened her eyes in disbelief and repeatedly shook her head as she shouted sternly, "Impossible. My Jing went to the Forgotten River Cold Valley. He can't." Clap, clap. Sikong Fuling clapped her hands twice and chuckled as she instructed the guards who walked in. Chapter 4783. Madame Long doesn't believe that the young master of the Wangchuan Dragon clan is dead. "Bring him in and let Madame Long take a look." As soon as she finished speaking, those guards immediately moved Long Huan's corpse in and threw it in front of Madame Long's wooden barrel. The corpse had already been blasted into bits and pieces by the god's stone cannon, but half of his face was still intact. It was indeed her Huan, her. Madame Long's eyes widened as she cried out in pain. "My son!" Her vision turned black, and she fainted. Sikong Fuling shrugged and threw a look at the two maidservants beside her. The two gorgeous maidservants grabbed Madame Long's hair and slapped her face twice. Madame Long slowly woke up, only to hear a cold voice ringing in her ears. "Madam, if you don't want your son to be unable to rest in peace after death, then you have to cooperate with me, right?" What do you mean?" Sikong Fuling reached out to take a small bottle of green medicinal liquid from the guard and looked at Madame Long with feigned surprise. "You don't know? Tian Yun has a medicinal liquid that can revive a dead person after drinking it. It's just that the appearance of a walking corpse might not be that beautiful." Madame Long shuddered as she stared at Sikong Fuling in disbelief. "My son is already dead, but Ding Yun, that heartless and unscrupulous person, still won't let him off." Sikong Fuling's eyes turned cold. "You can finally question me now. Then, when you harmed my big brother, who could he complain to about the pain and suffering he went through? Look at you, who are you putting on that righteous face for? My eldest brother was only an infant back then, but he was killed by you. Don't you know how much suffering and exhaustion he has suffered all these years? I'm just here to settle this score with you. Shouldn't I?" Madame Long couldn't help but laugh bitterly. Sikong Fuling impatiently interrupted, her eyes filled with cold fury. "If you don't obediently tell me the antidote for the love-severing poison, even if your son Long Qian is dead, I can still bring him back to life and order him to be a slave or servant. Be careful, holy maiden. This woman is accumulating power to self-destruct." The two guards had sharp eyes and immediately saw that the wooden barrel had swelled and deformed. They hurriedly shouted. Sikong Fuling hastily took a few steps back. She had only taken a few steps out of the water prison when she heard a loud, dull sound coming from the water prison. When Madame Long self-destructed, Sikong Fuling only heard that woman shriek, "Since I can't protect my son, then I will die with him." Sikong Fuling could not help feeling anxious. It didn't matter if that woman died, but she had to leave the antidote for the love-severing poison before she died. Madame Long's angry voice came from the air, "Ding Yun, the love-severing poison in your body can't be cured. You are destined to be alone for the rest of your life. You can't fall in love with anyone, otherwise you will die a horrible death." Ha 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 ha. The madam finally ended the farce with a series of crazy laughter. When the tremors subsided a little, Sikong Fuling hurriedly rushed into the water prison again, only to see that the prison was littered with rubble and Madame Long and Long Huan were nowhere to be seen. The two of them had been at the center of the explosion, and with Madame Long's explosion, they should have disappeared. Only a small pile of bone fragments was left on the ground, with smoke and dust billowing in the middle. Sikong Fuling's expression changed and she held her breath. Her bright eyes emitted two cold glints as she clenched her fists tightly and growled, "They got off too easy." You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.